Coming to you from the TLD studios in Temecula, California, it's the Whiskey Throttle Show, taking you deep inside the lives of the legends and leaders of our sport. This week's guest is brought to you by Yamaha, the leaders in the power sports industry. Motocross bikes, street bikes, adventure bikes, side-by-sides, quads, boats, generators. Yamaha sets the standard. Yamaha revs your heart. Method Race Wheels, the strongest, lightest, fastest wheels in off-road. Method dominates the off-road market with wheels for your truck, Sprinter, Jeep, or UTV. Go to methodracewheels.com/whiskey throttle for 20% off your order. Troy Lee Designs, built for the world's fastest racers. TLD blends elite level protection with industry-leading style and performance. Moto, bike, helmet paint, casual wear, whatever your passion, Troy Lee Designs is waiting for you on the next level. Nihilo Concepts, enhance your riding experience with superior products like the Start-Stop Conversion Kit, Fuel Petcocks, Frame Grip Tape, Lever Grip, Grip Donuts, Secondary On Switch, Billet Foot Pegs, Billet Throttle Housings, and so much more. Nihilo Concepts produces exceptional products, all of which are made right here in America. And by SKDA. SKDA is the ultimate destination for exceptional motocross graphics, customer service, and artistic excellence. Trust them to elevate your ride and showcase your individuality on the track, making every ride an exceptional experience. Hey folks, thanks for tuning into the Whiskey Throttle Show. I'm your host, David Pingree, and we're joined today with, I guess he'd be basically the godfather of vintage motocross here in the United States. Rick Doughty of Vintage Iron. Rick, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. Very much appreciate it.
Stoked to have you on the show. You've got a really interesting story, and I'm always intrigued by guys who've really seen this sport evolve from essentially its inception in the U.S. to where it is now and still involved. And you're one of the few guys that can really say you've kind of ridden just about everything, can speak to those older bikes with a lot of knowledge and intelligence and that I don't have. So excited to have you on.
Well, thanks. Appreciate it.
We start every show with the Method Race Wheels front end chatter. If you guys happen to be in the market for wheels for your truck, Sprinter, side-by-side, Jeep, whatever you got, you can get 20% off. It's a really good discount if you're buying a full set of wheels. Go to methodracewheels.com/whiskey throttle. They'll send you a code for 20% off. So great stuff. Definitely the lightest, strongest, fastest wheels when it comes to off-road racing. So check those guys out. You just finished, you're doing some promoting now. We just had one of your events, the Motocross Revival.
Right.
Tell us about that and kind of what the genesis of that was.
Well, the whole revival concept was, we were trying to harken back to when the sport was new. And for those folks that weren't around during that period of time, motocross was huge and much, much bigger than it is today. I always tell people that, I used to race at Bay Mare, which was a track in Southern California, and I would be in Division 7 of 125 Junior, and there were 40 guys on the gate. So there's 240
novices,
125 novice guys. Just that, right? Yeah. That would be a good turnout today by itself. But it was mammoth. I mean, you'd have to go get in line to go to your gate an hour and a half before your moto.
Mm. And do you think that the sport was bigger back then in general, or was it just racing that was bigger?
Well,
because I still feel like there's a lot of people involved in riding, and the stadiums fill up when we have a big pro race, but you go to any local racing, it's just, like you said, it's 150 people maybe.
Right.
200 people. That's a good turnout for a local event now.
Well, all you have to do is look at the numbers of sales that they have annually, and it's a fraction of what it used to be.
Is that right?
Yeah. Mm. But, everyone could do the sport back then. Mm. The bikes were affordable. Most of the time they were used. A lot of times they were street bikes you took the lights off of, but everybody could do the sport. Track wasn't too difficult. It was a family environment, and it was new and fresh, and man, it was a surge of people wanting to ride motocross.
Mm. It's kind of a bummer. We talk about this a lot on the show, where I feel like that was something that made the sport healthy.
Right.
Because the camaraderie that you'd have at a race, the sense of community, you don't get that just going to the track on a Tuesday and practicing, which is what everybody, and listen, I'm guilty of it.
Right.
I'm too busy to spend a whole Saturday racing. So I go get my laps in, I'll run down to the track, do a few motos, and I'm home by noon. But you miss that sense of community that used to be built at the races.
And there's nothing like racing, right?
No.
I mean, you can practice all day long, and it's fun because there's no pressure, but there's nothing like racing. That's why, the American Retrocross series that we run, our motto is done by one. So we get folks in, practice on schedule, races start at 10, we're done at 1 o'clock.
Oh, is that right?
Yep. And for that very reason, because most people have other things they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm a very reluctant promoter. I never wanted to be a promoter. I just got tired of going to crappy races, and I got tired of waiting and bad scoring and all that stuff. So instead of just bitching about it, I tried to do something about it. Right.
I love it. Well, we'll talk more about the series and how folks can get connected with it out here anyway. I want to talk about something else. The term vintage racing, or vintage motocross.
Right.
Has to continue to evolve, right? Because when I started, vintage meant, dual shocks and, the under pipes and all that stuff that I was kind of before my time.
Right.
Now the bikes I raced on during my pro career, that's vintage, right? I mean, it has to keep changing.
So are you.
Yeah, I'm vintage too. Yeah, thanks a lot. But you're right.
Yeah. And when I was on the board of directors for Arma, I brought that point up numerous times, to the point that Dick Mann passed a motion to silence me from bringing it up anymore.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, my dad was in the Model T Club of America, and he was a big Model T enthusiast. Well, guess what? They're a fraction of what they used to be because those guys all died off.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to see vintage racing go the way of the dinosaur, right? And so you have to chart a path that makes sense going forward from the point you started at.
Mm.
And Dick Mann really was the guy that got vintage racing going in California, and then across the country. He and I traveled all over the place, kind of doing the Johnny Appleseed thing, getting it going. But his vision of it was actually before two strokes. His vision was kind of how they had it in Europe, which is they called pre-65. Well, we didn't even have motocross here in 65.
You wouldn't have enough for those bikes, I can't imagine.
Well, motocross wasn't here.
Yeah.
So you can't take Europe's model and make it work in the United States. And I understand why they went to pre-75, 7 inches of front travel, 4 in the rear. And that was kind of the business model. And then they tried to build classes out backwards from there. But he told me numerous times that I wish we never even had to include anything past 1965, because for him, right, he was 20 some years my senior. For him, that was his vintage period. But what I would come back with is we're directors of this organization, and we're charting its future. We can't just look backwards all the time.
There has to be succession planning, right?
Right. And I ended up being a black sheep, but I'm kind of used to it.
Sounds like you've never been afraid to kind of speak your mind. And
well, when I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm pretty quiet. If I have a pretty good idea, well, my opinion's worth as much as somebody else's. And if I'm in a director role, I'm obligated to do what I think's best for the organization.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more of that. I'm in the middle of rebuilding, as you know, a 1986 YZ125. And, for me, that's vintage. Like, that's what I think of. The stuff that's all, it's just like Dick Mann, right? He had that window. Well, this is what I remember.
Right.
When I was a little kid watching guys race these. So that's vintage to me. Well, those 80s, that's vintage to me. Right. So that'll just continue to change over time, right? But as a club, you have to evolve with that. You can't be just like, no, this is what vintage is.
Right. Because
vintage changes every single year.
Because then you're going to have a diminishing return
yeah.
on your membership, right?
Okay, well, let's get into your story here. First, I want to just give a shout out to our website. If you guys haven't been over there to see the content we're making at whiskeythrottlemedia.com, check it out. All kinds of off-road stuff now. There's a moto tab, an off-road tab, and then obviously all the Whiskey Throttle shows can be accessed through the site. We have merchandise over there. There's a forum. Great stuff. Go check it out. We're doing some fun stuff. And the Vintage Iron Project, which Rick has been involved with, where we've interviewed different motorcycle collectors with some crazy vintage bikes, a lot of championship bikes, Michael Holligan and Hugh Parker, our friend here in the Bay Area that had Wardy's bike. We got Wardy on his championship winning KX125. That was a pretty neat.
That was a great day.
So all this is brought to you by Yamaha, and we appreciate their support. If you guys are looking for a motorcycle, start there, please. Rick, tell us where you grew up.
Well, I was born in Florida to an Air Force family, and ended up moving to Australia 5 years later. And that was a good experience as a young kid. We had kangaroo for a pet in the backyard, and yeah, it was pretty cool. And I ended up going back to Australia later in my life, and really love it down there. Then we moved to Washington, D.C. My dad worked at the air base where they fly the president in and out and all that jazz. And then we got the transfer to Edwards Air Force Base, and that's where I started having a lust for motorcycles, because you've got a backyard that goes on for.
So prior to that, you hadn't really gotten into bikes at all?
No, I liked cars.
And what is the? Yeah, I actually recently had an engineer that I was working with who was his dad was in the military, and he was telling me how often they moved, and I'm like, man, how do you even? Right about the time you start making some friends and get some regularity in your life, poof, you get up and move again. And it's not like you're moving a couple towns over. You're going from Wisconsin to Australia to
And the way I try and explain it to people, because it's pretty traumatic as a kid.
Yeah.
Imagine everything that you know on your daily basis just disappears, and the only thing left is your family, because you're just transported to another existence, right? It's very surreal. And it happens over and over and over. And so, and during that period of time, there was no internet, there was no emails. To make a long distance call was, you had to take out a loan to make a long distance phone call. So it was a different world then. And it was bothersome enough to me that I sought out a life and things in my life that were stable, that didn't change all the time. But it's the life of a brat.
Yeah. It just seems like it would be very hard. I moved from Montana to Arizona when I was 10, and that was just that one move.
Right.
Man, it was difficult. You feel so vulnerable as a kid, like
new kid in school.
New kid, you don't know anybody, everyone's already friends, and you're trying to fit in. Man, it's hard.
Yeah. I was always the new kid.
Yeah. It's not a great feeling.
And my name was Patrick. I just go by Rick.
Oh.
And I would constantly be new in school, and on the roster, I was Pat, and they were always looking for a girl. So I'd go weeks without even acknowledging that I was there.
Oh my God.
My folks would get a call, hey, your kid's not attending. No, he's there. He's just not answering.
He's just sitting quietly.
Because you didn't want to be branded with that, right?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Did you have siblings?
Yeah, 4.
4 siblings.
Yeah, and Catholic family, so.
Okay. You're the youngest, oldest?
Smack dab in the middle.
Oh, okay. And what did you do pre-bikes? You said you were into cars. What else were you interested in?
Well, that was grade school, so, cars were cool, some they didn't have. But my dad being in the Air Force, and he was in private aviation also, I flew with him a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah, both in small aircraft and then gliders. He was very much into that. They call them sailplanes now, but gliders, we would do that every Saturday morning. And, he basically was teaching me how to fly when I was a kid.
Okay.
And
did you get your pilot's license now?
Nope, never did.
Okay.
Because I was flying without having one, right? You had him in the front seat and I was in the back, or vice versa. And with my dad, it was, we didn't just fly in a straight line. He's like, okay, you want to learn how to do a loop? Well, hell yeah, right? pull back on that stick. Well, I was small enough that I'd be upside down. My head would be against the canopy and the seatbelt would be down to my knees.
Oh no.
But you learn to accept that risk, right? For the thrill. And that transferred over to motorcycles pretty well.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. So what was your first bike and how old were you?
Well, we had moved it to Edwards out in the desert, and first bike was a Taco 22. So it cost $139, and we rode the crap out of it.
Yeah.
And the rear sprocket was almost the same size as the rear tire. So anytime you turned to the left and it hit a rock, you broke the chain. So we got really good at fixing chains. Anytime you went out for a ride, you had a pocket full of master links. But we had a whole group of kids, and you were either a Taco guy or you're a Bonanza mini bike guy or whatever. And
what year would this have been?
1968.
Okay.
And we would take those. They had lawnmower motors for the most part, right?
Full start, right?
Briggs and Stratton or Tecumseh. And we would take those things and ride 20, 30 miles, right? Because you'd have a gallon of gas, they'd go forever.
Yeah.
We'd ride all the way out to like Willow Springs, get gas and ride back. It'd be an all-day deal. And as long as you're home before dark,
yeah,
you're good.
Yeah. Never had any incidents where someone crashed out in the desert?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But you just kind of patch them up and get them home and
rub some dirt on it.
And you didn't have an option. You're 20 miles out there, so you'd never let your kids do that today.
Well, so I grew up in Montana, 70s. I was born in 75, but it was the same kind of vibe up there. I took off, and whether it was motorcycles or bicycles, we were just gone all day.
Yeah.
And there's no phones. As long as if I went to a buddy's house, I checked in, or I was home before dark.
Right.
Those are kind of the parameters. Yeah. And so I try to give my kids a lot of leeway. They have e-bikes, they have a golf cart, and I'm like, yeah, all right, something my dad always said to me, I'll give you enough rope to hang yourself. And my kids have hung themselves. They're currently grounded right now, which I won't get into, but I do give them room to go and make those mistakes and have a childhood because, man, we were kind of the last ones that really got to live like that, pre-phone, all that bullshit.
Yep.
So,
and it's good because it teaches a lot of self-reliance and it gives you that explorer spirit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we would just go a direction. We didn't have a set destination.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. What a cool way to grow up. Did you get into racing right away, or was it just you guys just really were enjoying riding?
Well, we were pretty young, 12, 13 years old, and there was a whole pack of us that were kind of growing up and then starting to get into motorcycles. And the first time I ever rode a motorcycle, we went out with another family for a picnic. This is on the base.
Okay.
And Edwards was where they tested all the stuff, right? I mean, that's where the shuttle came from. But way before that, there was the X-15 and a bunch of other cool stuff. They had a rocket test center out there. And so we would go out and ride in that area. And one of the officers that came with us that day had a motorcycle. And he said, "Hey, you want to ride it?" Well, I've only been riding a mini bike. It's like, hell yeah. And man, first time I rode it, and it was probably a 80 cc, whatever, with the lights taken off. It's like, this is what I want to do. I mean, everything else was...
It was like a light switch, huh? Yeah.
Oh, it was just unbelievable. The power, the feeling, the independence. I mean, it was big boy stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And it was life-changing. And I've never forgot that feeling. I've had it a few times since then, but they've all been related to motorcycles. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was the deal.
So what was your first race?
First race was, well, it wasn't really a race.
Okay.
They used to have these things called, they were like club days, and they would have they'd have a barrel race, they'd have a trials, they'd have a, desert loop, they'd have all sorts of stuff. Right. Mm-hmm. And it was the club that was on the base, and I told my dad, hey, I want to ride out there and watch this to see what the whole thing's all about. And he goes, okay, just don't race. You bet. So I went out, and I had no intention of participating. And one of the guys is like, hey, kid, you want to try it? And it was a barrel thing, right? And I said, well, okay. So I did it. I didn't enter. So I was technically not racing. And I did it. And they were like, hey, you just won. I'm like, what do you mean? You just went through the barrel thing faster than anybody in the small bike category, which back then trail bikes were 100cc and less.
Yes.
I was riding like a Honda 65.
Okay.
With the lights on it. And they were like, well, why don't you try the trials thing? I go, okay. But I'm not entering. They're just encouraged me to try it.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, they gave me a trophy because they said you won the small bike class.
Okay.
Well, I was like, oh, shit, what do I do with that? Right? So I had my buddy take it to his house.
Dad's going to be pissed.
Oh, yeah. So that lasted about 2 weeks. And I was like, I couldn't stand the idea that it wasn't sitting on my dresser, right? So I figured I'm just going to take the punishment. Brought it home, sat it on the counter, and waited for my dad to come home from work. And he's like, what's that? And I told him. He goes, yeah, I told you not to race. And I said, yep. He goes, all right, you're off for 2 weeks. You can't ride. I'm like, oh, yeah. I mean, I figured at least.
You knew something was coming.
Yeah.
Just happy your ass wasn't bright red at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Paint my back porch red. So he there was no spanking at that point. He knew how to get to me, right? That was,
he found your,
yeah. So, but my mom told me 2 days later, your dad, every party we go to, that's all he talks about is that you won. And,
he's still got to punish you though for disobeying.
But he wouldn't let me ride. Yeah. And it's funny because I did an interview for an article I was writing with DeCoster, and he told me the same story. His dad told him, don't ride. And he went and did it anyway. Yeah. And then he's reading the area newspaper, and it says that he won. Like, you got to win, though. Otherwise, you're in really deep shit, right?
Yeah, Roger told us that story on his show, and I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
As he hid the bike at his buddy's house. He didn't leave the bike at the house. Yeah. So that was your first event. Then did your dad come around and go, all right?
Yeah, eventually he could see that I was very focused. I was getting decent grades, but I wanted to ride. So, and I had met a couple of lieutenants on the base, young lieutenants that were just new into motocross. One had an AJS and the other one had a Husky. And they kind of mentored me and got to know my dad. And they were like, hey, we'll walk you guys through this. So we went to a place called Dead Man's Point, which is out by Victorville, Apple Valley area.
Yep.
And they used to have races on a pretty regular basis. It was pretty close to the base. And I was fish out of water. I had, my bike, I had a Yamaha 125 at this point, which was not a race bike. It was an enduro, and we pulled the lights. So I had electric start. I mean, it was a trail bike. And I had big, tall desert bars because that's what you did. You stood up and rode in the desert, right? And here I am with these like ape hangers, and all these other guys are on motocross bikes. And, I was okay in the dirt and the rough, but I'd never seen mud holes before. And back in the early days of motocross, every track had a mud hole.
Yeah, Supercrosses used to have mud holes even.
Yeah, or multiple mud holes.
Yeah.
At Dead Man's Point, they had 2. I crashed in both of them every lap. Every lap. And we had to do 3 motos. After Moto 2, I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm not really cut out for motocross. I'm not going to do this. And then my mentor guys are like, yeah, you are. Because that's what motocross is about. It's about being tough. Mm-hmm. And you can't quit. Like, every time I fall down, the mud goes into my air cleaner and clogs it up, and I foul the plug and this. And it's motocross. It's tough. And that day I was like, man, if I make it through this day, maybe I'll become a motocross guy. And I did. And, I learned how to work on a bike because my dad was, master mechanic. He was head of maintenance at Edwards. So you don't get to that point without a lot of experience.
Did he help you quite a bit and kind of build it seems like you have a passion for working on bikes and the mechanical side as well.
Yeah, I don't think I'll never be to his level, because he grew up where they had to fix everything, right? And I went through depression and all that. There's
no money to have somebody fix it. You fixed it.
You fix everything. You fix the tractor. You fix the washing machine. You fix everything. So I'll never be at his level. But he instilled that with me, and he also made it real clear: if the bike's not ready to go, you're not going.
Yeah,
you better prep it. And he also was like, hey, you need to broom out the garage before you go riding. And I made the mistake of doing a half-assed job one time. And he's like, did you take everything out? Oh, well, no, I there wasn't much dirt back there. He goes, I told you to clean the whole garage, right? You're not going riding today. And that hurt. And I had to take everything out of the garage, broom it out, and then sit at home. So my shop's pretty clean.
Yeah. Those are lessons though. And I've said this before. I've had this conversation at some point on the show. I feel like generationally,
right,
we keep getting softer and softer. And I'm a part of it. I can't do the stuff my dad could do for the same reasons you're talking about.
Right.
He could rebuild a car engine because he had to.
Right.
When they were younger, if I wanted it fixed, I had to fix it. You read the manual and you just figure it out. Electronics. He could build a house. I mean, he could do anything. Maybe not like at a craftsman level, but he could get it done.
Right.
Man, I just go plumbing. Yeah, I don't know. Call a guy. Electricity. I don't know. Call somebody.
Right.
I hate myself for it. Like it sucks, but and I just thought, well, I was just so busy with racing that I didn't have time to take all that other stuff in. But it just seems like everyone I talk to is like, oh yeah, I can't do what my dad could do.
Right. Well, I mean, and all of that's true, but like when he would come visit, he'd like want a list of things to work on. He wasn't happy visiting, right? What's broke? I got to fix it, right? And
like, work ethic almost was just culture back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't give it up, even in his 80s, right? And I'd be like, Dad, look, there's a valve in the shower that's leaking, but I've got a plumber coming next week, and we can do it. I'm like, Dad, I don't want to start getting the hammer and tile out, and that I don't have the tools to change the valve. We'll figure it out. And then I'd go to work, and he'd be calling me every hour. Hey, you gonna come pick me up so we can go to the parts store?
Yeah,
like shit. That's what he lived for, is to fix stuff.
That's funny. It's just I love hearing those stories because a lot of this sounds really familiar to my childhood. Like I brought home bad grades one time. My dad sold everything.
Oh yeah,
and I didn't ride for eight months, and I never got bad grades again. So as painful as those moments are, you remember it today, and your garage is still tidy, right?
Yeah, so. I tried to bring my kids up that way, for the most part.
Yeah,
got a lot of resistance, but I made some pretty firm rules. Especially when they got cars. If I ever catch you intoxicated, you're not going to get on suspension. Your car's done.
Yeah.
And I sold one.
Yeah. You got to. You have to. So that was kind of your first race. Did you guys then get into racing pretty regularly?
Well, that was the summer fall of 69, and my dad got orders to go to the Philippines. And sometimes they would go ahead of the family, right? And they'd be there because they needed to start the job, and the family would follow 6 months later. And that was the case. So man, it was full throttle, go to as many races as I could, because I had these two lieutenants.
Are you selling bikes then at this point? Like you guys sell everything and go down with just...
Well, no, my dad's in the Philippines. We're still in Edwards, and I've got my bike.
But are you going to have to sell it? Like when you guys were moving, it was fire sale, everything.
Yeah, they only allow you like one vehicle, which is usually your car,
And your suitcases.
Yeah, and then tools and stuff like that. But while my dad was away,
You were on it.
I was racing as much as I could race, and yeah, we were racing all over the place.
Okay.
And these lieutenants were just, teaching me the ropes. And yeah, I know you had Gunnar Lindstrom on show recently. He was my first motocross school.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, there was a track out where LACR is now called Anzac, and it was 1969. And he and Mark Blackwell, who you've had on before, were running the school. I went to the school. I didn't even have a bike. I would just walk from place to place just to listen because one of my buddies was going, and I was just trying to sponge up as much knowledge as I could.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was something else.
Oh, that's cool. Different time too, where now if you're like, hey, how do I go through a corner? You could get on YouTube and there's a million videos, half of which are probably bullshit.
Yeah.
There's online, Elevate, that we have an online coaching thing. You could hit a coach, just throw a rock and hit 5 of them at Glen Helen on any given Thursday. Back then, I got to believe there was a vacuum of knowledge on especially motocross, right? It was so new that when you had a guy like Blackwell or Gunner, you're like, let me just tell me everything you know. I want to know everything.
Right. And all we knew is those guys were really fast and they were really fit. And during that period of time, the Swedes were dominant. And yeah, motocross was just so new. You just didn't even hear it. It wasn't even in the popular lexicon, right?
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't like the shops were all full of motocross bikes for sale. The desert racing was big, but motocross was just starting, and everybody had their interpretation of what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But it was popular because you could see it all.
Yeah. What were the races like? Were there proper motocross races going on, or was it kind of like scrambles still, or off-roady kind of stuff?
I mean, in 68, 69, it was pretty established. I mean, the earliest ones were probably 66. And, I have a poster from one of those races. And it actually took place in the riverbed by my old shop in Yorba Linda. And it says right on it, knobby tires recommended. And they would just take, a piece of ground and put up some banners and go, there you go, have at it.
Were there any motocross parks open? Like Glen Helen used to be called Arroyo. Was that open at the time? Was Indian Dunes or Saddleback or Carlsbad?
Indian Dunes opened late in 69.
Okay.
And my friends went there. Those lieutenants, the day they opened, and it was a mess. So I never got to race there then. I think Saddleback was going, although I never made it to Saddleback during that period of time. So it was a lot of little, podunk places. There was a track called Pozo in Bakersfield, but you had to drive.
Yeah.
For pretty much everything. One of the biggest tracks was probably Baymare, which they ended up having the nationals at later on.
And where was that? Like
Fillmore.
Okay. I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Interesting. There was a lot of those that I never got to. I'm so bummed I never got to ride Saddleback or Indian Dunes. Indian Dunes in particular looked really fun.
It was. They had two different. They had an international course and the Shadow Glen course, and it was, that night racing was huge back then. I mean, I'm sure with Gary Jones' story, he talked about how often they could race. I mean, there was
6-7 nights a week.
Yeah, and making really good money.
Yeah,
really, for the day, they were making fantastic money. But that whole night racing thing was really big.
Interesting. Okay, so you go to the Philippines.
Yeah.
Are you able to ride? How long are you there? And
2 years.
Okay.
It was like purgatory or a prison sentence, but it was like going back in time, right? Motocross was happening in California. I was just getting in the groove of all of that. I was riding a Yamaha 125 with an expansion chamber, which is a big deal. And I go to the Philippines, and it's like third world country. And
where were you at in the Philippines?
We were south of Manila at Clark Air Force Base.
Okay.
Pretty popular base still.
But rural? I mean, was it kind of
Well, the base is all to itself, right? They're all fenced off, and
Gotcha.
you're living in a bubble on the base. But it's south of Manila, and there was no big city at all. But I mean, my dad was all excited that there was motorcycle racing, right? And
Down there?
I wasn't going to be bummed by that we're living in this country because there's motorcycle racing. So he takes me out to the races, and I'm like, oh my God, these like Honda 90s from the early 60s with street tires on them and a paper plate duct taped on, and this guy, he goes, I already talked to this guy and he's going to sponsor you. I'm like, okay. And his name was Lou Webb, and he had these jean jackets that had Lou Webb Racing embroidered on them, and you had to wear his jacket, and you had to ride this piece of crap bike, and it was just such a step backwards.
You were bummed,
like, holy, but it was better than not riding.
You're still riding, yeah.
And the track was smooth. It was like TT track, and they didn't water it. They poured oil. 55-gallon barrels of oil from the airbase on the track, right? Which is, I'm surprised I don't have lung cancer.
That's what so all of the trails in Montana that ran alongside of the road.
Yeah.
That's what they would do to keep the dust down when I was a kid.
Right.
Just slick them with oil.
Yep.
Use motor oil.
So it was something to do. And it was a really, really different environment. We only had 2 tracks. There was one at the Air Force Base and one at the Navy base at Subic. That was a couple hours away, I guess.
Okay.
And, but they took it serious, right? When I'm just there as this new American green kid, right? Going to ride for Lou Webb's Racing on this piece of crap Honda. And this other guy comes in, and he's got his bike hanging off the back bumper of his car, and he's got like 50 little Filipino kids just screaming and following his car in. I'm like, well, what the hell's the deal, right? I mean, he was like a rock star. Well, he was the factory Kawasaki rider, and he was a Filipino guy, and he had a fan club. They're all little kids, but I mean, they would cheer for him. They were just so excited that he was there. He was a big deal till I beat him.
As a kid, you beat him?
Yeah. Well, turns out we're almost the same age.
Oh, okay.
But back then, I mean, he drove himself to the track.
Yeah.
And
so what? He wasn't on like a nice Kawasaki. It must have been just...
No, it was brand new, current model.
Right.
But I mean, it wasn't like a KX 125. Back then, it would have been, like a trail bike that you took lights off.
Yeah.
And some Filipino guy probably made an expansion chamber for him, that didn't have any dimensions or whatever. But I mean, he knew that track, and he knew how to ride and all that stuff. And he became my rival the whole time I was there.
Were you guys friends, or was it a...
Oh, no, it was...
Okay.
No, there's kind of a story there in that once I got off of the rental Honda, I told my dad, I can't ride that stuff. It's just, it's not, I appreciate the offer, but it's not a very good bike. So in 1970, Christmas, he flew over to Japan and bought us a SL 100.
Okay.
Honda. It was a new model for them, single cylinder, had a high front fender, so that meant it was a race bike. So we spent Christmas Day taking all the lights off of it. And so I started winning on that. And then my brother and I were having to share it. And then I finally convinced him to get me another Yamaha 125. But this time, get me one that doesn't have an electric start. And, it's actually something we can make into a race bike. And, you're familiar with GYT stuff now. Well, back then it was just called Git Kit. And so you would buy a Git Kit for your bike. You get a cylinder head and a pipe and maybe a different carb. And it made a big difference. I mean, they were considerably faster. And once I got that, I pretty much
put the whooping on him.
Yeah, I dominated. And that's when the trouble started, because he didn't like that very much. So he couldn't catch me, but he could lap my brother. And my brother was small at that point, he was probably 12 years old, and he would just knock him down blatantly.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd take him out. And it happened enough times that my dad finally said, you need to fix that. Well, my dad never told me to get in a fight with anybody, right? But when your dad tells you, you need to handle that because he's hurting your little brother, well, puff your chest up and go handle it. So I went over there and punched him in the nose.
Yeah?
Yeah. And he had an entourage. The only 6-foot Filipino guy I ever saw took the strap on his helmet and clocked me in the side of the head. And my dad's 150 yards away, and at all the races they would have the Philippine Constabulary, the PC, their police, right? He sees this melee breaking out, and he fires off a shot. Well, it coincides with me getting clocked in the head. Here's the shot, sees me fall on the ground. He's like, oh, crap. I just told my kid to go get in the fight, and they killed him. So he comes over and finds out I'm still alive. I got a big goose egg on the side of my head, and they wanted to put me in jail. Yeah. So I had to go to court. They were going to put me in jail, which was in the basement of this courthouse. And it looks like they had the inmates dig it out. It's just a cave, and there's a bunch of guys with brown underwear in there going, fresh meat.
Yeah, great.
And my mom went into hysterics. They finally got me to be able to, they took my passport, so I was on international hold. Couldn't leave the country, but I could go home. So that was a win.
What about the guy that hit you in the head with the helmet? Nothing happens to him?
Well, but I'm an American, right? And I'm in their country. And so, yeah, I was on international hold till like a month before we left to come back home. Jeez. Yeah, they took that stuff pretty serious.
So when you guys finally get out of there, I imagine you were happy to probably get out.
Well, so I get off international hold. We're leaving. My dad gets orders, and you never know where you're going to be sent. He gets orders for Edwards Air Force Base again. I'm like, cha-ching. We're going back to Motocross Central. I know everybody there. It's going to be great. And my dad said, I'm gonna take you and your brother, and we're gonna fly to Japan, and we're gonna get a bunch of new parts for the 125 Yamaha, and then you get to pick a bike. So I picked a 1972 Yamaha DT2 MX. It was the first real motocross bike they made. The other ones were always trail bikes with the Git kit on them. This was a full-on motocross bike. Okay. So we get over there, and I'm all yippee skippy because we're going to Edwards. I'm getting a new bike. Life's good. And he goes, oh, by the way, our orders changed. We're going to Grand Forks, North Dakota. I'm like, oh boy, Grand Forks where? I didn't even know they had a North Dakota. Isn't one North Dakota enough? I mean, where the hell is it on the map, right? So we ended up getting shipped to North Dakota, which, if you've ever been there, is as flat as a pancake.
Yeah.
Flat as a pancake, and almost less motocross racing than the Philippines had. I mean,
there's not a lot out there. Yeah.
So
even still pretty flat.
But he wanted to retire soon. He was at that stage in his career, and he wanted to make the transition from a state that was close to Wisconsin. So he was happy about it.
Is that where he's from, or?
Yeah, my folks were both from Wisconsin.
Okay.
And so they wanted to retire there. He took this, it was a strategic air command base. He took that job just to make that transition easier. But man, did it suck for motorcycling.
How long were you there?
A year.
So not much riding?
Oh, well, I mean, I rode.
You got the bike.
I rode we would go to Minnesota, and there were a couple of tracks in North Dakota, like Bismarck and some other places that we would go ride. But it was a long ways from Edwards Air Force Base and motocross, as we knew it.
Yeah. So after a year, then where?
Then we retired to Wisconsin.
Okay.
And, when you get into that part of the country, and Millville was like our home track, and I mean, there was a lot of activity down there, and the guys were good. And
This would be 73, 74.
Yep, we moved there in 73.
Okay.
Yeah, and that part was really good. And I raced that DT2 quite a bit. And then moved to the 125 class the next year.
Okay.
Made the mistake of buying a Suzuki. Because in 1974, if you rode anything other than a Honda, you're gonna get
When was the Elsinore launched? 75?
74.
74, okay.
Yeah, it was.
And it really was like far and away. Yeah.
Except they were all jetted poorly. So they loaded up all the time. So you'd have some guy that was just smoking everybody, and he'd load it up in a corner, and then he'd be sitting there,
Oh, even while you were riding, it would load up?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did they not have, you couldn't jet them? Or, I mean, like...
Well, everybody just rode them the way they came out of the box, right? And they were jetted really poorly. So you'd have to turn the fuel off, hold the throttle wide open, and just wait for it to cycle through enough gas.
Jeez.
And I mean, this was a really common sight in 1974. And the bikes were so good, people were putting up with it. And then somebody said, hey, you can grab the overflow tube and suck on it, and it'll clean it out immediately. And it did. But then, you had all these guys parked on the side of the
Sucking on their...
giving oral sex to their Elsinore. I was like, yeah, my Suzuki's looking pretty good right now. You
maybe got a better bike, but I don't look so good.
Yeah, I mean, the Suzuki handled good, but
why wouldn't they jet them? Were jets not available? I don't understand why they wouldn't just put a smaller range in it.
I don't think anybody, it was a brand new model.
Yeah.
Nobody really had any experience with it. I mean, nobody bought a bike that came out of the box that didn't run right. So it took a while for people to figure it out.
It's a lot like the fuel-injected two-strokes right now. They're terrible. They're terrible. Anyone that has ridden one goes, yeah, it sucks. It's totally flat. It's boring to ride.
A two-stroke.
Yeah.
Okay, not the four-stroke.
Not the four-stroke. The two-stroke fuel-injected bikes.
I haven't ridden one.
It's having the same thing where people don't know what to do. They're like, and just a few people.
On the vent tube.
I'll tell them to try that. Yeah, I've heard if you suck really hard on the muffler, it helps. I don't know. Give it a try. Anyway, it's just funny as new technology comes out and people are like, that's where we're at with the fuel injection on the two-strokes right now.
Well, we were like that with suspension early on, right? I mean, you bought a Yamaha monoshock, you didn't know anything about sag.
Right.
Other than that's what happens when you sit on it.
Yeah.
Sags. But you didn't know how to set things up. You didn't know how to dial in damping. You didn't know any of that.
All right.
And so we just rode the shit out of the way it came.
That's funny. So, all right, you're racing a couple of years there. Then what? Did you guys be back to California, obviously. So what was the...
So I was in Wisconsin, and I did my senior year of high school there. And
so you'd been in California, Philippines, North Dakota, Wisconsin, all while you're in like junior high and high school.
Yeah, I went to 4 different high schools. And but the last year I had enough credits that when I got into the second half of my senior year, I only had 1 class.
Yeah.
And so I was working. I had a girlfriend, and I had told her I would marry her when we got out of high school. And no, she wasn't pregnant. I just told her I would, and I do what I say I'm going to do. So 2 weeks out of high school, I married her and loaded all my crap in a trailer and headed west.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Is that your wife today?
No.
Oh, okay. I was like, that's a crazy story.
Yeah. No, it's not.
So in hindsight, probably should have held off on that, or what?
Well, I mean, you're a kid at 18.
Yeah, I know.
But honor was always a big thing for me. And I was like, man, if I told her I was going to marry her, I got to do that. Yeah.
I don't really like her, but yeah, I told her I would.
No, she was a good person, but we were kids. And it was a dumb thing to do, but you're allowed to do dumb stuff when you're a kid.
Can't learn from your mistakes till you make them.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but that year that I rode that Suzuki, I only rode half the year, like up to the beginning of June. And races in the snow belt don't even start until
May.
late March, early April, right? So I only raced up to June, and I still finished second in the 125 expert class for that AMA district. And there were some good guys back then. I mean, later on, I was racing with Scott Wallenberg and that whole crew of people from Illinois, and but there were, you remember Danica Kirkpatrick?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Her dad raced with us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was a bunch of factory Can-Am guys, and it was a good series.
Big crowd back in that pocket. There's like a big pocket of, I think still to this day, there's a good motocross crew in there.
Well, yeah, you got Michigan's really strong, and well, Jace is from Illinois, I think, isn't he?
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure what town, but he is Illinois boy.
Yep.
Okay, so how did you get back to? You loaded up out of high school and just drove out here, and you were like, I'm going back to Lancaster, or where?
Well, I was. My sister lived in Canoga Park.
Okay.
So I stayed in her garage till I figured shit out. And
did you get married?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
2 weeks out of high school. Yeah.
Okay.
Velvet bow tie and the whole thing, right? Yeah.
All right.
Try and hide those pictures. Anyway, so yeah, I was just bound and determined that I was going to find a job in the industry, and I was going to race motocross.
Okay.
And so I did. I got out here, rode the Suzuki a little bit, and was like, man, the competition in California is way tougher than Wisconsin. So I got rid of the Suzuki. I bought a brand new 360 Bull Taco in the box.
Okay.
And then built it myself. And it was one of those bikes where you have to put 20 hours of work in it before you ever put it in.
74?
74. Yeah. Really good bike.
And it was competitive, huh?
Oh, I mean, I bought it at the end of the model year. So the 75s had come out, but the only difference was that, they moved the shocks up a little bit.
But even versus the Elsinore? Or was that just a 125 at that point?
Well, Elsinore, they had a 125 and a 250, but to me, 500 class
that was the man's class.
That was where men raced,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So I bought a 360 Bull Taco, and I had gone to Indian Dunes and some other places and watched what worked. And there was Kenny Zart and Ron Haas and a whole bunch of guys, Joe Root, that all raced Bull Taco, and they hooked up good on the hard ground. So I bought one of those, and it was a great bike, except it had just little bizarre things that would break on it. I've never had a tire delaminate. Have you?
No.
Yeah, I had a Pirelli delaminate. The frame broke. I mean, there was just a lot of freak things. The ignition went out. The rod went out. I mean, but man, it was so light. It was like 212 pounds for an open bike.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I got a job working at Kendick Engineering that made pipes and carburetors and stuff for go-karts.
Oh.
But, they were also kind of a motorcycle shop. And his first job I interviewed for, they offered me a job, and I was on it. So they sold this thing called a pumper carb. And it was, the same theory as a lot of the carbs are today, where they're all externally adjustable. And so this thing was a 40 millimeter carb I put on my 360 Bull Taco. Talk about wake it up. And you could just dial the jetting to make it perfect. So that was a nice add-on. And I worked there. There was also a company called Tube Art that was part of that whole Kendick Engineering thing.
What class were you racing at the time then?
500 intermediate when I first moved out there. Yeah.
Okay.
And, I was a top third of the class. So I would say
competitive, but not crushing everything.
Oh, I wasn't winning. But because I had all these freak things with the Bull Taco, I had a lot of DNFs, and we were at Indian Dunes one day, and Kenny Zart owned Indian Dunes, and he was a pro.
Was he one of the big main guys back at the time. Okay.
Owned
Okay.
Indian dudes. Like,
Who else? Who would have been his competitors locally in Southern California at that time?
yeah, I mean, Billy Payne was a Mako guy. There was Ron Haas was another Bull Taco guy. Joe Root. There
No relation to Billy Payne from the 90s.
was there a Billy Payne?
Yeah, rode for Mitch.
Oh, that was his son.
Is that his son? Okay, well, that's why I was wondering.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I forgot that. I believe that to be the case. So there was a kind of a hotbed there, but you know how one guy just becomes, I can't remember, was it Val Tamietti that was like the king of Saddleback? There was always somebody that was like
the local guy.
And Kenny Zart owned Indian Dunes.
Okay.
So I had some sort of problem with my Bull Taco, and they ran the intermediate gate second to the pro gate, and whatever it was that was a problem, I got it fixed on the side of the track, and Kenny Zart came by. So I just fell in behind him and was trying to see what he was doing, and I was keeping pace. And the announcer was like, "Who the hell is this guy?" Right? He's an intermediate, and I hung with him till the end of the moto. And didn't mean anything to anybody but me, but I was like, "Oh, I can go that fast." I just did. And I did it all because I was following him.
Yeah.
But it gave me that one missing part, which was confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and it's funny, I have a question in here where I would say, was there a moment that kind of where your career bumped up? You know,
Yeah.
A lot of people, this is what happened with me, is kind of when I hit puberty. For me, that's when it happened. I was always like, I was technically okay, but I didn't have any of that. I needed more testosterone, right?
your balls dropped.
My balls were tucked up a bit too much. And when they did, boy, I went from being mid-pack at amateur nationals to I'm competing for wins, just like that.
Yeah.
And so I have a friend whose kid's going through that right now. I'm like, he goes, yeah, he just won't, guys, he just doesn't want it. And I said, well, wait till he starts growing a couple of hairs under his armpit. I said, it'll probably change on you. So, but it seems like there's always something.
Right. I asked Roger DeCoster that question once because having been around a long time, you see guys who are just also rants, and then the next season, all of a sudden they're dominant. I'm like, how does that happen? I mean, especially, you know, when I was in the snow belt, you're not riding in the wintertime, and the guy comes out and he's great. And Roger's answer was very telling. He said it wasn't one thing, it's a bunch of things, right? It's family support, it's fitness, it's the bike, it's a bunch of things.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, hanging with Zart that day was
a big moment.
Yep, it was.
So tell me about your first pro race. When did you turn pro? And did that obviously had to have had an impact on your decision? You're like, I just hung with the pro who beats everybody.
Yeah. Well, right around that same time, my brother and the owner of the local motorcycle shop in Wisconsin came out to visit, and we all went to the USGP. And
Glen Helen or Carlsbad at the time?
Carlsbad. Yeah. And so we all went to the USGP, and at the end of the day, he said, "Hey, I want to offer you a job." Well, I just moved to California a year ago, right? And he goes, I want to offer you a job. Doing what? He said, I want you to manage my shop. And he was a Mako dealer. You know, I mean, a Mako dealer back then might have a bike on the floor.
Not a lot to manage.
Yeah. And they were also a snowmobile dealer, and they sold Gemini mini bikes and a bunch of stuff. And I was like, I mean, I just got out here. I'm just getting my feet wet. So I went back. He let me ride his bike at a local race. And you know how brand new bikes work. And they're just amazing. Everything's tight. Everything works. I just smoked everybody. And he's like, you could be the dude. I'll give you a bike, you know, every year. And it just said all the right things. It just, you know, I wasn't smart enough about business to say, hey, let me look at your balance sheet, see how you're doing. Should have. But I went back to Wisconsin again and ran the Mako shop, raced pro from then on out. And there were a bunch of pro races back then. So you rode expert, and then if there was a place that was offering money, you went and raced those races too.
Mm-hmm. And how are you doing?
Good. I was, always in the top 5 group and won, and made a little bit of money. But I mean, pro racing back then, you didn't make squat.
Yeah, it was tough to make bucks. So, it sounds like this dealership went tits up. I mean, how long did that take?
Yeah, about a year.
Okay.
About a year. Yeah, I mean, I knew it'd be in there the first few months and going, where's the customers, right? How does this guy keep this deal going? My paycheck was cashing, but not much else. But in that time period, I did a lot of racing. I got to know the Mako distributor pretty well, and they knew me. And so when that all went bust, I got a job in construction, but I also got bikes from the distributor.
Oh, okay.
And my rival was Scott Wallenberg.
Is that right?
He was riding for the distributor too.
Okay.
And it was always, we're going to give the best parts to the best rider, so you got to beat him. And I threw myself on the ground more than a couple times trying to beat Scott. I beat him a few times, but I think he beat me more.
Yeah. That's funny. How'd you get back out to California? Because you came back here, right? Again.
Yeah. After
it was back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah. And the 18-year-old getting married thing didn't work out. So
when you were back there, that's when that ended. Okay.
I was married about 4 years.
Okay.
And that started to disintegrate. And it just, those places where you're stuck, from Montana, I mean, you're stuck inside all winter long. It's just not good for your head. It's just, it's
not good for a relationship.
Well, it's not good for anything, right?
Yeah.
And we weren't going out to bars and doing all that stuff that was kind of popular in Wisconsin. And it just was like, this isn't working. So she went her own way, and I loaded up and came to California.
Okay. At that time, that's when you said, I'm out.
Yep.
And then did you continue to do construction out here?
Well, later on, yeah.
Oh, okay. So tell me what happened when you got back out here.
Well, that's when I sold the Makos because they were always breaking, and I bought a 78 Yamaha.
Okay. That was a good bike, right?
Yeah, they worked. Like I said, we didn't know anything about suspension or sag or any of that stuff, but just the bike worked, and the clutch worked, and the ignition, the trans, and all the things that were a problem with the Mako weren't a problem with the Yamaha. So yeah, and so I rode 500 Pro on that. Did pretty good, and that's hot tubs were a big deal back then. So I got a job working with a guy that was installing hot tubs and decks and arbors and all that stuff. And I already had construction experience. So it's like, sure, I'll help you do that. And that kind of blew up. And pretty soon I was, his manager and running crews, and we were busy. But I said, hey, I'm going to go race this mammoth thing that I've heard about forever. So I'm taking off 2 weeks or whatever it was in June. I'm going to go up a week early, get acclimated, ride, all that stuff. And so I did. And I was riding 500 Pro. And it was pro practice day. I think it was Friday or whatever. And there was a big right-hand sweeper there, a big tall berm. And the pro guys were going around it wide open. And I wasn't. And I was like, unless I figure that out, I'm probably not going to figure out anything else.
Is it a section that's still on the track? I mean, it's pretty similar.
I haven't ridden there in a bunch of years. I think it is. But anyway, I just kept practicing it, kind of getting off the track, coming back into it. And then, how it is. Once you get it right, you're like, oh, that's the feeling, right? You got to go do it again. So I went and did it again a couple more times. And then the top of the berm broke off. And I went from turning to going straight into a bunch of rocks, big rocks. Cartwheeled me, and I landed flat on my back on top of a big granite boulder. And that's when I had my near-death experience.
Okay.
I felt I was unconscious, but whatever, I had a consciousness inside of me, and I could just feel it pulling away.
Really?
Oh, I mean, it was a very strange thing to try and describe, but I was unconscious to the world, but I was ultra conscious of what was going on with me, and my life force was just leaving my body. And I didn't have that experience where you look back and you see your body. I just knew I was leaving. And I fought really hard. I was having this telepathic argument in my head. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I want to go.
Wow.
And I eventually came back and I started to regain consciousness, but I was so far off the track, nobody knew I was out there.
Oh.
And so I laid on this rock for a long time and nobody was coming to help me. I mean, my bike had to have been laying flat or whatever where it couldn't be seen. So I literally had to roll over and then drag myself out onto the track. And there were still bikes going by. So somebody would see that I'm injured.
Yeah.
And then they got a 4-wheel drive ambulance out there and took me to the hospital.
Huh. What was broken or hurt? I mean, outside of concussion, obviously.
Yeah. I thought I broke my right femur. Obviously concussion. There was a bunch of other stuff that was beat up. They took me to the hospital in Mammoth, and they were getting ready to take me into whatever room. And my brother says, "Hey, do you have insurance?" No. He goes, "Do you know what this is going to cost?" I was like, I got off the gurney. started hobbling out, right? And they're like, "No, you can't leave." I have to leave. I can't afford this. So I made a commitment that if I could walk come Sunday, pro day, I was going to race. And it wasn't pretty, but I was walking. And first moto, gate drop, I got hole shot.
Oh, no.
Worst
case scenario.
Worst thing to do, right? I'm like, I got Rex Staten and a whole bunch of really good pros behind me. And then luck happened. God tapped me on the shoulder, said, "Hey, I'm going to help you out." I hit a rock and just exploded the front tire. I was like, I got a flat. Oh, God, thank God. It wobbled off the track. I had no business being out there. But, yeah, that was the end of my pro career. I was like, well, no, actually that was the second closest that I came to the end of my pro career. Later, we were doing a Golden State race, and Rex lapped me. And I was like, if I'm getting lapped, I don't care what class I'm in. I'm done. And I sold the bike 2 days.
And that was it?
Yep, 6-year break.
So 6 years of no riding.
I didn't own a bike. Yeah, after all that time.
Man. So what did you do during that 6 years?
I started working on building my own construction company.
Okay.
And we did remodels. We did a bunch of different stuff. And then the energy crisis hit, if you remember, in the early 80s. And Pacific Gas and Electric Company was looking for ways to mitigate people's bills and, save energy and all that stuff. And I was just kind of there at the beginning of that. So I got my foot in the door, and we started doing insulation and weather stripping, and it turned into this thing called weatherization. And it turned into a big business for me. We were doing $6 million a year, and I had offices from Bakersfield to San Francisco, and all I did was drive from this office to that office. She's pissing on fires every day for years. But it was such good money, and there was so much business that I just kept building.
So the home builders, we were doing business with the home builders to install this stuff when they build them, or
we were retrofitting homes. You had a lot of low income people who were on fixed income, and then the energy bills are going up, and they had to help those folks in some way. So
Okay. So it was government subsidized to.
well, it was mandated by the government, but Pacific Gas and Electric had to pay for it.
Oh, okay.
Because they would go in and want rate hikes, and then the Public Utility Commission would say, well, what are you doing for fixed income people? Unless you help them, we're not giving you this. So it was an interesting thing, but it did have government involved in it. I met a lot of California government folks through that.
Yeah.
Like Willie Brown, Kamala's boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. Okay, so 6 years of that, and why did you get out of that? Or like what brought about the end of that? If that was doing so well, did you sell it?
Nope. I wasn't smart enough back then. I had kids, I had 2 boys, and I was like, after the second one was born, they were only 18 months apart. My first son, your file drawer in your desk, I took all my files out and I made that his crib. Because I was working 6 days a week, right? And he learned to walk at the office. He thought the secretaries were his mother hens. And then so I got number 2 that comes along. I'm like, yeah, this isn't the life that I wanted for my kids. I got to figure something out. And just prior to them coming into the world, I got the itch to have a bike again. And I went through the Fresno Bee newspaper and the classifieds back when we had newspapers. And I found a Yamaha Trials bike. I was like, man, I always wanted a Trials bike. I bought it for $300-400 and restored it. I mean, it was a rattle can resto. Back then you just took all the body work off and freshened up the motor. And I was like, that was fun. So then I put an ad in the paper that said, wanted any old dirt bikes. In a year, I had 100.
Oh, geez.
But it was all sorts of stuff, right? I mean, there were Bull Taco Matadors and all. It wasn't all motocross stuff.
Yeah.
But it was very clear there was a business there. And then the year that my first son was born, I had heard about this Dick Man rally up in Brentwood, California, outside of Sacramento. And I drove up there. And I was looking at the bikes going, this is all the shit I used to ride, right? And I had a connection to it. I knew how to work on it. It was just like the light bulb went off.
What year would this have been?
88.
88. And so you're looking at late 60s, 70s model stuff.
Yeah, it's funny how, if you go back 15 years now, what you're looking at, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was that era of stuff. So I had already recognized that there was kind of a movement, and it was the kind of movement that mountain biking had. It started up in Tiburon area of both San Francisco, and it just exploded because people were digging it. And this whole vintage motorcycle thing, it was catching fire in the same way. So I started buying bikes through the newspaper and fixing them up every once in a while. And the first one I got done, I put it in Cycle News when we had Cycle News, and I sold it for $600 restored. And I thought I was cutting a fat hog. So
what did you have into it total? I mean,
it was all fiberglass, right? So I had all the fiberglass painted and, countless, I didn't count any of my labor. It was just something I was doing because it was fun.
Yeah.
But I sold it the first day I put it in the paper. So that was another affirmation that there's a market out here.
Yeah.
So when number 2 son came along and I made the commitment to make a change in my life, it was pretty clear what my avenue would be because it was my only other avenue. I didn't really want to do construction anymore. I did it because I knew how to, not because I loved it.
Right.
And I thought, well, here's a chance, that old saying about if you do what you love, you'll never have to work a day in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I'm qualified for this job. So I just started building the brand. And I mean, I was buying bikes and fixing them up and just trying to get them out on the track to build customer base.
Yeah.
And then I would get famous people, like Malcolm Smith or whoever that was a name guy, and say, hey, I'll restore your bike for you for the cost of parts and paint. I'll do all the labor for free. Well, why wouldn't they, right?
Yeah.
But then part of it was that I get to use your name advertising my company. And so I did a whole bunch of those and started to build a brand. And
That was Vintage Iron.
yep.
Yeah.
And then I started bidding my construction stuff with PG&E at a level that if I had to do it, I was going to make a lot of money. And if they said, we're going to go with the next lowest bidder, that my path is chosen, and my path was chosen. So, the whole construction thing, I just never wanted to be an average guy at anything. And like, all my guys were in uniforms, all my trucks were painted, we just had a really high level, and it cost a certain amount of money to maintain all that. And if I had to, drop my pants and drop the price, I didn't want to be a part of it
that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you probably could have sold that. There's certainly value in.
Wasn't suited enough back then. I just wanted out, and wanted to move to Southern California, because if I was going to do vintage iron, that was the place to be, not the mid part of the state.
So 89, you moved down?
No, it's actually, because I started it there. I stayed in Fresno for a period of time. I moved to Yorba Linda in 98.
Oh, okay.
And so, it took a while to unwind everything. And I had 60 employees and offices and leases and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It takes a while. But I moved down in 98, and then we did the Ironmen of Motocross banquet, and then the first Vintage World Championship in 98 at Glen Helen.
Okay.
And the Ironmen of Motocross thing, we invited guys from all over the world and paid them to show up at Auburg and all these famous guys from the 70s, and had this big banquet at in San Bernardino at this hotel. And that kind of, put us on the map again too.
Okay. And so take me through the genesis of Vintage Iron. Like, how did that grow over the next several years?
Well, I mean, when we started, I was a construction guy with a lot of money, and I was just looking around to do something that I thought would help guys. And they all had like goofy fenders, modern bike fenders on old bikes, and they looked dorky, right? And Husqvarna's had a very unusual mounting system. It bolted horizontal through the fender, so you had to have a fender that was designed that way in order to bolt it on. And I thought, well, that's what I should make, is Husky fenders, because those guys can't find anything that even works for them. So I did. And I remember, you have to have molds made and do minimums and all that stuff, right? And so I lay them out on probably a tarp at a race, $25 a piece. You know how it was received? Are you kidding me? You're an asshole. Why would you try and rape somebody for $25 for a plastic fender? The same fenders now are $100. But nobody, and it's like, you don't have to buy them.
Yeah.
And, but that's what they cost.
Yeah.
Right. And I was building a market where there wasn't a market. And we finally got people to come around it. They didn't have handlebars that were the right height. So I found a place in San Jose that used to make stuff for Motocross Fox when they made parts. They made all our handlebars, and we had like CZ bend and a Husky bend and a this bend. And you got to buy a bunch of them.
Yeah.
You got to stock them. So it turned into a pretty substantial business. And then you look at what you go through to restore a bike. You need suspension, you need engine parts. So
yeah,
we just started offering all that, and we were kind of the General Motors of vintage motorcycles for a while.
I didn't know you got into manufacturing parts too. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yep. So we had a bunch of stuff going on.
So you were restoring and reselling bikes, then manufacturing parts to sell for people that were also doing this on their own or whatever.
And then I went to international distributors also. So we had like one in Holland, one in Australia, one in Japan. We had distributors all over the world that were selling our product. So that part was pretty cool too. I wasn't making the money I was making in construction, but I was home every day too. And I wanted to be at, all the soccer practices, even though they made me gag. And, I remember being at a soccer practice one day and going, yeah, I played football when I was a kid. Soccer was for kids that didn't want to get tackled. And the woman goes, my husband went to college playing soccer. Looked at him, and yeah, that fits.
Sounds about right. That's funny. So what was kind of the next thing for you? Were you racing at all during this time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got back into riding, but mostly vintage?
Yeah, I was just doing the vintage stuff because, if you look at the time period when I quit, which was 80, 81, 80, I think it was, to 86, the tracks and the bikes changed a ton.
Yeah.
Right. Double jumps were like a brand new concept in 80. It wasn't that popular on motocross tracks. Supercross maybe, but not on motocross tracks. But by 86, there was doubles and triples in every track. And I was like, how do you even do that? How do you gauge how fast to hit it? I was a fish out of water. So the vintage thing was much more attractive to me.
I feel like we've gone through another little period where the tracks have evolved a lot in the last, say, decade or so. Because I go out now and even the vet tracks, I'm like, well, that's a pretty big jump for a vet track, but okay, like I won't name any particular tracks, but there's some spots where you're just like, yeah, I get it. I wouldn't want to do this if I wasn't riding regularly and really comfortable.
Right.
And I think that's why you're seeing dual sport riding becoming so much more popular, and off-road and enduro stuff. All of those guys that were making up the 7 heats of 125 novice, they're all in their 50s and they're like, I'm not jumping doubles. So what else you got for me?
Right. And if you can make the stuff safe, that's one thing. If you make it do or die, that's a whole different deal. And it's just not. I don't care how old you are. I was going to tell you a funny story later, but I took a motocross school with Tony DiStefano, right? Tony D's motocross schools, because a buddy of mine wanted to go and he didn't want to go alone. And he left the jumping part till the end of the school. He goes, okay, now we're going to go over here and we're going to do doubles. Well, it wasn't doubles. It was 3 doubles in a row. So you really had to have your timing down. And I know Tony a little bit. He goes, hey, Rick, why don't you show everybody how it's done? I'm like, nope, not doing it. He goes, how come? I said, I'll watch. And I can't remember the guy's name, but he rode for Mitch when he was a Husky guy, right?
Okay.
Mick something or another.
Not McDougal.
No.
Okay.
But apparently he was a Husky guy for Mitch back in the day. Okay. And he's like, hey, I'll do it. And he came around and hit the first double, over jumped it, smacked into the face of what would be the third jump, broke his collarbone. And I said, that's exactly why I didn't want to do it. But I'll do it now.
I watched him screw up.
Well, I wasn't taking any glee in him crashing, but I had an idea of how fast he hit it. And I mean, if you're going to have that kind of stuff in tracks, in my opinion, you should start guys off in terms of learning, saying, okay, this is a 20-foot double. This is how much speed you need to clear a 20-foot. And then you're going to do...
There just shouldn't be doubles on a vet track. It should be tabletops or round step-ups with long tails. So you can see the landing. Right. And if you come up short, it's a long landing to so that you don't get spit over the bars and the front wheel drops.
Or graduated. Down lamps.
There's safe ways to do it. And I feel like that's a second or third consideration for these track builders. You know?
Most of the time, track builders aren't riders.
or they're young riders. That's what I found.
Yeah.
Right there, guys are going, oh no, it's not that hard, or it's fine. And it's like, well, hold on.
Yeah.
Literally, you're talking about 50 and 60-year-old guys here who have to work on Monday.
Yeah.
They don't want to jump this shit. They just want to, let's just make a fun course for them to have some fun on. I don't know. It frustrates me to no end.
Yeah. I see a lot of times the guy running the tractor isn't a rider, and that's not they try hard, but they just don't have a concept of what it's going to be like when you're on a bike.
Right. So what was next for you then?
You mean after I got the vintage iron thing rolling?
You got vintage iron rolling.
Well, I'm looking for ways to expand the market.
Okay.
Because it was pretty small at that point. And there was talk about this group in New York called Arma, and they wanted to bring the motocross community, vintage community, into the fold and have an organization like an AMA, right? I wasn't a part of any of those negotiations or whatever, but it happened. And so then everything that we were doing became an Arma event. And then they wanted to start a national series for motocross, and I became the sponsor. And part of, and I gave them a bunch of money, but I also went on the road. I would do about 40,000 miles a year, traveling to all these different places. And people, for the most part, had never had a vintage race before. So we'd have to set up the track and give them the class layouts and help them with all the stuff that it took to get established, and then find a guy that might be able to replicate that in that area. So you got a regional guy that's going to help, and it's that Johnny Appleseed concept. Yeah. So I did that for a bunch of years.
And expanded vintage racing pretty significantly over that
time. I mean, it put that on the map for, it's made it a mainstream part of the sport.
Yeah. Yeah, I think now more than ever, baby boomers being kind of the age that they are, that was the group that was so prominent in the 80s, of riders.
Yeah, I think if you do it right, it just continues on. It's just the whole vintage thing's driven by nostalgia, right? Cars, motorcycles, airplanes. What doesn't matter what it is, you get to a point where you start remembering things fondly from your youth.
Mm-hmm.
You either had it or you wanted it and never got it.
Mm-hmm.
So those two things. And vintage racing's that.
Yeah. And
you're not going to go ride like you were when you were 16, but you could maybe ride the bike you did when you were 16.
Yeah.
And that part's really fun. So, and then you add the mechanical aspect of restoring the bikes, and a modern bike doesn't really need you that much, right? You can wash it, put gas in it. It doesn't really need you.
Yeah.
A vintage bike needs you. You got to be in there interacting with it. And I don't know if you know or remember Fred Fox from Parts Unlimited.
Not Fred.
Well, Fred was the founder of Parts Unlimited, and he looked really hard at buying vintage iron at one point. And I was back there several trips trying to put all that together. And that was the one thing he liked about my company the most. He goes, "You're going to put guys back in the garage. And when they're in the garage, they're connecting with that bike, and they're going to buy parts. They're going to be involved, right? More than just, you take your modern bike and push it back in the garage.
Yeah.
It'll be there when you go again.
Yeah. Wash it, filter, throw some gas in it, and
right." But he saw the potential in that creating revenue. So it didn't ultimately happen because one of the guys that was really driving the whole purchase got killed in a snowmobile accident, tragically. But anyway, I think that's a big part of the desire that people have with vintage bikes. I mean, I have a 1966 El Camino, and I work on it, and I don't work on my 2023 Chevy truck, right?
Yeah.
But I love working on the El Camino.
Yeah.
And driving it.
Yeah, it's definitely different. Well, and again, it comes back to nostalgia. I remember, I have great memories of my dad showing me how to change a top end on an RM80. Just those two-stroke things, right? For me, that's my vintage era. So now I'm this 86. That's within 4 years of that window, right? Like, so I get it. I totally get it, and I think it's great.
Well, one of the other things that's cool about vintage racing is that you can go into time periods. They're like little time capsules, right?
Yeah.
You can go to time periods you were never a part of.
Yeah.
Like I have a Rickman Matisse that was from the mid 60s. I wasn't riding dirt bikes then, but man, when you ride it, you feel like you're in the 60s.
Yeah.
Because those guys, they were dealing with short travel and big, heavy engines and it's a whole different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to live it because you're riding it.
Yeah. You also sort of put yourself into that era too. I'm already looking at this. I keep using my build that I'm working on just because I relate to it. But I was like, okay, LaRocco was riding that bike and Burnworth, like I'm looking at the guys who raced that year and like just thinking about cool photos I had seen or videos of them. And so that I'll be thinking about that when I ride it for the first time.
And hopefully you'll be geared up.
Well, yeah, it's kind of harder to find some of that gear, but I know Burner does have some of his open face helmets. I might have to hit him up.
It's fun to do that, to wear the gear of the day.
Yeah.
It kind of completes the whole thing.
Well, I hope I can launch this thing and come out to one of your races to actually compete on it. So you're doing the replica parts and restorations. I mean, is Vintage Iron at that point doing pretty well? I mean, you guys are.
I'm feeding my kids with it.
It's awesome. Living the dream, man. You literally went out and built something around something you love.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a dream, but
well,
it was. I've been an entrepreneur most of my life, and you eat what you kill. So I've got that kind of ethic about me that I got to hustle, make stuff happen, and it expands as you have a family and a mortgage and all the rest of the stuff. So you just got to hustle.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people will say, I'm not ready for kids. I say, well, sometimes it's the best thing you can do to get your ass in gear.
Yeah.
Because when you've got little ones now, it changes your priorities and perspective and what you realize your responsibility is now. It's not just, you on the couch. Now it's okay. I got to feed this thing. What the hell am I going to do? I better have a plan. It'll change your work ethic right there.
I just heard a thing on the news yesterday about bed rotting, and it's the new trend for Gen Zers that they just stay in bed for days on end, and it's cool. It's kind of a hipster thing to do, apparently.
Wow. Yeah.
Bed rotting.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
I think I'll go riding instead. So how involved are you then with Arma at this point in the storyline here?
Well,
I mean, you're out running around promoting all the stuff. Are you and Dick Mann butting heads over the ideology at this point?
That came.
Okay.
Initially, I was just following his lead. He's a famous rider guy, and I'll never take anything away from what he accomplished on a motorcycle. And he was responsible for kind of kick-starting the vintage thing. So he gets big props for that. But to pigeonhole it that small, and trying to keep it just to what he saw as applicable vintage models, I was like, that's not sustainable. And, when I started to speak up, going, we need to make a roadmap to the future. We don't have to do it today. I mean, in terms of changing everything today, but we do as shepherds of the club, of the organization, we got to figure out how to move forward. And that was not met with a lot of positive thinking. And when you have a board of directors and you got famous people on it, and back that period of time you had Dick Mann and Jeff Smith. Jeff Smith was the executive director. And they're both famous guys. Jeff Smith, two-time world champ, and Dick Mann, multi-time national champ. When you have people of that stature, nobody wants to go against them, right? They'll voice an opinion, and everybody else just kind of goes along with it because they don't want to be the one to go against it, right? And the Japanese have a saying, and I don't remember exactly what it is, but you don't want to be the tall nail because that's the one that gets hit with a hammer first. And I never really cared about it. I just, I'm going to tell you what I think.
Yeah.
And
I've got a touch of that too, and I've been hit with the hammer of time or two as well.
But one of the attorneys that Arma had at that period of time when we were in board meeting once said privately, he goes, "You're really interesting to watch." And I said, "Why is that?" He goes, "You don't say a whole lot until you get to a point." And I said, "Well, I'm trying to take everybody's opinion in and fully understand what we're talking about before I'm going to voice an opinion. I don't want to go off half-cocked." And he goes, "And everything that you offer is usually reasonable." And I go, "Yeah, but it's not received that way." And he said, "Well, I can't help you there. That's just the way it is." So that turned into, a conflict. And I remember we were at Steamboat Springs one year. We went there for 10 years, and we would have one of our annual board of director meetings. And Dick Mann said, "Hey, Rick, can you give me a ride back to my condo after the meeting?" "Sure." And on the short ride back to the condo, he goes, "You know why you're dangerous?" Like, I didn't know I was dangerous, but why? He goes, "Because people listen to you, and you're going to screw all this up." And I said, "How am I going to screw it up?" "Well, you just keep wanting to change things." And I said, "I'm just trying to say that this little time period isn't all there is, and that people that were 10 years ago are going to be 30s. And that's when nostalgia starts to kick in. And you have to, this has to be sustainable." And he's like, "Nope, that's going to mess it up. It should only be about this era." That's
not crazy talk.
Well, but and I have a lot of respect for Dick. He's passed now, but that's the way he saw it. He didn't see it from my perspective, and my perspective was as an entrepreneur and going, we need to widen our audience. We need to have a deal forward. He was pretty much okay with it just dying with him.
Yeah.
It was
It's a selfish viewpoint at the end of the day. I know you don't want to
yeah, no, but ultimately,
kill him, but
yeah, ultimately it was a selfish viewpoint. And I learned the reason I'm kind of soft about him is I learned a lot of things from him. I mean, he was a thinker about a lot of stuff, and I appreciated all that, and I got a lot of wisdom from him that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. But he was dead wrong about that, and I told him that. I said, this is not a good business plan. Now, on the other side, yeah, Jeff Smith, and I have no problem telling you I hated him. and it takes a certain amount of energy to actually hate somebody. He's worth it.
Really?
Yeah. He just, yeah. He's probably nice to his family, but that's it. And to give you an example, we were at a race at Farleigh Castle in England, and Jeff's, is British, right? And he was a British champion. He was multi-time world champion, so on and so forth. And we're both up on the stage, and they introduce him. He got like a golf clap. They introduced me, and I got a big round of applause. I didn't like him, and I felt bad for him.
Oh, really?
And I asked somebody afterwards, what the hell was that about? And they go, "Oh, he was a total prick when he was a pro, and people would want to get his autograph."
Only difference now is he's not a pro.
Well, yeah, and he was worse, but and he would just tell people to piss off, right? Mm-hmm. "I'm not here to sign your autographs. I'm here to race motorcycles," and that was kind of his outlook on life. He was very, me-centric, but to do business with him was really, it was uncomfortable because he wasn't, in my opinion, an honorable person, and he would work behind the scenes, so you didn't know who you were really dealing with. And Dick Mann was more straight up.
Yeah,
he would tell me what he thought, and I'd tell him what I thought. So, yeah, he's about one of the only people in my life. But my older sister, she's probably worth it too.
Oh, if you can't hate your family, who can you hate, Aaron? All right, let's take a little break here. We got a lot more cool stuff to get into here, but this is going to be your Troy Lee Designs timeout. Stick around. We'll be back here with more Rick Doughty. Friends, family, and loved ones, I bet you haven't purchased a Father's Day gift yet, have you? Not to fear, the leaders in below-the-waist grooming are here. I'm talking about our friends at Manscaped. They are saving the day yet again with the total package for the father figure in your life this year. It's time to upgrade his game from waist to face with this exclusive offer. Have him join the 8 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get 20% off plus free shipping using the code Whiskey Throttle at manscaped.com. Let's start with the ultimate Father's Day MVP, the Performance Package 4.0. In this package, you're going to find their signature lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, brand new Weed Whacker 2.0 ears and nose hair trimmer, and we know their ear hair is out of control. Like, let's just face it. If you're old enough to have kids, you probably got hair squirreling out of your ears like a bad set of weeds. You also get the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant, Crop Reviver Toner, Performance Boxer Briefs, and a travel bag to hold his goodies. And we can't forget about the moneymaker. Manscaped has absolutely changed the game with their new Beard Hedger Pro Kit for fathers around the world. Included is the Beard Hedge Trimmer, Beard Shampoo and Conditioner, Beard Oil, Beard Balm, and 2 free gifts with their signature beard comb and scissors. It's a lot. We all know dads love their comfort. If his grooming routine is already dialed, make sure to hook him up with Manscaped's Boxers 2.0. These are without a doubt the best boxers for men of all ages. Super comfortable, can confirm. These things are like, slipping into a nice pair of pajamas, but you can wear them all day. Whether he's mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, golfing in the sun, these moisture-wicking boxers breathe without breaking a sweat. So, get 20% off and free shipping using the code Whiskey Throttle at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code Whiskey Throttle. Make this Father's Day one you won't forget with Manscaped. There's a new product on the market that's going to help you with your riding and racing, and it's Elevate Action Sports. If you've not yet gone and checked it out at elevateactionsports.com, it's a collective of riding coaches, the likes of which has never been put together. Grant Langston, Ryan Hughes, Jeff Emick, Johnny Campbell, and myself, David Pingree, bringing all of our years of experience in professional racing to one place with professionally produced videos and all kinds of supporting staff to help you with your mental side of racing, your physical side, your bike setup, your bike maintenance. We cover it all. Get to Elevate Action Sports right now and join the community.
Dunlop. There is a reason every AMA championship in the past decade was won on Dunlop tires. They are the best. Choose the best performing tire and a brand that has never wavered in their support of our sport. Choose Dunlop. Pro Circuit. Pro Circuit products are designed with one goal in mind: winning. Through passion and hard work, Pro Circuit has operated the most successful 250 team in the history of the sport. They use that same formula when developing exhaust, engine, and suspension parts for every brand. When only the highest level of performance is acceptable, trust Pro Circuit.
Since 2009, Seat Concepts has been dedicated to making the best aftermarket seats. More comfort, more grip, more riding. For 10 years, we've continued to raise the bar. Innovation and American craftsmanship make Seat Concepts the world-leading manufacturer of power sports seats.
Something from nothing. That's what Nihilo Concepts is about. It starts with a spark, an idea, a concept, which leads to a design, and finishes with engineered excellence with the highest quality products created with durability in mind. All our products are made in the USA at our state-of-the-art facility in Stuart, Florida. Whether you are a weekend warrior, ride for fun, or at the highest level of competition, Nihilo Concepts offers innovative titanium, aluminum, and carbon fiber parts for your dirt bike. We offer a wide variety of products that you can customize to your liking. Browse our site for foot pegs, brake tips, engine components, specialty tools, frame grip tape, lever grips, carbon fiber components, motor stands, our secondary on-switch, plus much more. Head to NihiloConcepts.com and see for yourself why factory teams like Red Bull KTM, Rockstar Husqvarna, Troy Lee Designs Gas, Orange Brigade, Club MX, KLM Gas, and some of the fastest riders in the world choose Nihilo Concepts.
Specialized Bicycles. Specialized leads the way in the world of bicycling. Whether it's cross-country racing, downhill, e-bikes, enduro, road, gravel, dual slalom, dirt jumping, or all mountain bikes that do it all, Specialized has the perfect ride for you. The brand is synonymous with engineering excellence and innovation that steers the industry. Visit your local Specialized dealer for a test ride and see just how good Specialized products are.
I try to keep on keeping on.
With a rich history in motocross, ProX has been dedicated to supplying quality components since 1975. Whether you're rebuilding an engine or just need a new chain, ProX Racing Parts aims to bridge the gap between OE quality and affordability. ProX has over 9,000 part numbers and over 60 different product types that are manufactured by highly reputable or even OEM suppliers and are offered at affordable prices to help keep riders on the bike instead of in the garage. Visit ProX.com to search parts for your bike or check them out at your favorite online or local dealer.
Audio Jungle.
The guys are just breaking in their race bikes, which will leave on the semi this Saturday to go to the first Supercross for our coast in Orlando. So the guys are just be goofing off a little bit, do some cool photos, do some cool videos. When you go racing, you want to do well, but a big key is keeping the bikes on the track. That's why we chose to work with Motul.
Expectations coming in as a rookie is just to try and get my feet wet and honestly just send it, see where I end up and do my best out there, but just ride aggressive and ride like myself in practice and I should have a good time.
Challenges of this sport, I believe, is just simply staying healthy. With how fast we're going and what we're doing, your margin for mistake is really, really small.
Stay Sick. If you have little rippers, then you have had to have seen Stay Sick bikes by now. We have created bike and experiences that allow kids to develop sooner and empower them to find their own ride. From learning to ride to sharpening skills, the Stay Sick promise is accelerated growth. Whatever path your family chooses, it's going to be the ride of your life. Stay Sick Stability Cycles.
I'm on vacation every single day cause I love my occupation. I'm on vacation. If you don't like your life, then you should go and change it.
Welcome back. That was your Troy Lee Designs timeout. If you guys have not visited TroyLeeDesigns.com, go check them out. All kinds of new summer line gear, SE, GP, all that is out. They've got some new off-road stuff. If you've not seen the Scout line, the paint department is firing. And the mountain bike stuff is out. All kinds of things going on. TroyLeeDesigns.com. Check them out. And we're also doing a really cool feature on our social media page called Collected, walking through all of the collection of helmets I have. And when we finish with that, we're going to be moving over to Troy's and looking at a lot of his memorabilia, which is incredible. Yeah. Incredible. There's a set of Nicky Hayden's leathers, race leathers in there. And I know I couldn't afford them, but like I want them so bad, you know. Anyway, really cool stuff. So check that out when we talk about TLD stuff. Just amazing stuff. TroyLeeDesigns.com. Let's jump back into your story here. So one of the things I thought was interesting, as you were a board member of this Arma, which for those who don't know, American, is it historical or AHRMA. So what's the...
Yeah, American Historic Racing Motorcycle Association.
Okay. You did something that I thought was pretty cool, rather than, because you're not just motocross, you were dirt track and there's road racing and trials and things. So you went and did a little bit of everything.
Well, I felt
in all of it.
Right. I felt like if we were going to pass legislation on it, I wanted to know from a rider's perspective. So I bought all those different kinds of bikes, went and did those races. I wasn't the best guy at all those disciplines, but as a board member, I felt like it was imperative to know from the ground level what we were talking about.
Sure. Yeah, I just appreciate that. That's not everyone would do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to have a bad day on a good motorcycle. So
yeah,
I had a lot of fun learning that stuff, and not jumping into road racing until you're in your 40s. That was a bit of an eye opener.
Yeah, it's different, right? I've done a handful of track days, and I really enjoy it. When I got into supermoto, I got really familiar with the asphalt because that was 80% of what we're doing.
Right.
And went and did some track days, and man, it's a different animal, but really fun, and in a completely different way for me than what motocross is.
Right.
The things that are scary are totally different, and the things that are fun are different,
Well, with road racing, it's concentration, right? You got to be concentrated for a long period of time. And, there's the risk factors are different.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a lot of time to listen to your motor on a road race bike, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if something goes bad with your motor, it's going to probably end in an ugly way.
Yeah. I think that people don't, and this is I'm painting with a very broad brush here, but as a guy who grew up in motocross and supercross, but then got into some off-road, got into supermoto. I did some hill climbs, the mini bike racing thing. I've kind of tried to do as much as I can. Snow bikes, and, I would say the only thing I haven't really probably gotten into is trials, which I'm going to change that this year. And I haven't done any road racing, but I've done, like I said, multiple track days, and I love it.
On what kind of bike?
Different bikes, some smaller 400 stuff. I did a 600 R6.
Right.
I don't care about 1,000 cc. I don't need to go that fast. The 600 was all I needed.
Yeah, the little 600s are no slouches these days.
No. So for me, it's just that feel when you can hit a breaking point right and time a corner right. I mean, it's a cool feeling. Like I said, just different things that are cool about that,
right, than
motocross.
Yeah.
Get your knee to the asphalt and you're like, hell yeah, look at that scuff on there.
But
you learn. My point is you can learn a lot about a motorcycle and how to manipulate one in any kind of discipline, right? I learned things in supermoto that made me a better motocross racer, and vice versa, and all around. I think motocross fans are very isocentric. I love motocross, that's it. And a lot of them won't open their eyes and go, oh, well, what is off-road about? Let me try some trials. Let me go get on a street bike, and some of it's cost prohibitive, but
trials will change you a lot.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's not always a bunch of throttle. Sometimes it's the opposite of that, right?
Yeah.
When you turn off the gas, the rear tire hooks up and pulls you through sections, and you don't lean down into a corner. You let the bike lean, and you kind of...
Yeah.
There's a bunch of things that once you ride trials, you go, man, why didn't I do that on a motocross bike?
Right. Yeah. So anyway, that was my only point, is I think there's a lot to be learned, no matter what discipline you're doing. And you actually won a Sportsman of the Year award. Was that kind of based on all of the stuff you'd been doing?
Well, every year they were giving out a Sportsman of the Year award. I was winning championships in motocross and some of the other stuff, but really the holy grail of their awards was Sportsman of the Year. And they waited till the end of the night. There was a big banquet in Daytona, and there were several years there where I thought I was shoo-in, right? And I was pretty disappointed when it didn't happen, not because I felt like they owed it to me. It's just the criteria they were using. I thought, I'm going to probably get it this year. Didn't happen. The year that it happened, I believe, was 93. I was sitting in the back of the room drinking scotch.
Getting drunk because you thought you weren't going to win again?
I was like, screw it. Sent my family upstairs to the hotel room. And I was sitting back there with Gary Nixon and Roger DeCoster and a bunch of people. And we were just drinking scotch and having a great time. And they announced it, and I didn't even hear it. I'm still back there and there's people going, "Hey, Rick." I'm like, "Oh, hold on. Gary Nixon's telling me a funny story right now." Like, no, they've called your name 3 times. For what? Sportsman of the Year. You need to go up there. I was like, oh shit, this is not going to be a good speech.
Can we see this drunk speech somewhere on YouTube?
No, thank God. Yeah, it was interesting because it was totally out of the blue then.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
But I wouldn't have traded those stories with Gary Nixon and Roger. That was a pretty good night.
Yeah. So take us through, you've talked a little bit about your butting heads with Dick Mann and sounds like Jeff Smith as well. Did he have the same kind of views that Mann did in terms of what vintage was?
Yeah, Jeff Smith wasn't as, it wasn't as much of an ideology issue. He wanted to get paid as much as he could get paid and do as little work as possible. And that I resented that as somebody that works hard. And, I suggested once in a board meeting, hey, since you're traveling around and all this stuff, we'll buy you an enclosed trailer, keep your bike indoors, and put signage on it, right? I mean, then you're advertising for our organization on all these highways that I'm not pulling a box trailer, but where you're pulling a flatbed trailer now, what's the difference? I'm not doing that. And it was all about what he would and wouldn't do and how much he got paid. And I remember one year he was showing us how much money we were supposed to give him for a raise. And, at that point I had 60 employees and been in business a while. And I was like, usually I ask one critical question of an employee that comes to me and says they want a raise. What more are you going to do for me? Because I'm already paying you for what you're doing. If you want more money, what more are you going to do? And he thought that was idiotic. And I was like, well, that's where we differ, right? So he was milking the gravy train, and I didn't like it. And my beef with Dick Mann was more of an
ideological.
Yeah. It really was. And he thought it should be of a certain era and not go any farther, and I didn't think so.
Yeah. So how did that play out?
Well, Dick, like I said before, was influential because he was famous and Jeff Smith was famous. And anything that kept me down, Jeff Smith was for that. So when Dick proposed that we have a moratorium of 2 or 3 years that prevented me from even speaking about other classes for the future, it's like, man, am I a Russia? Mm-hmm. You're going to tell me I can't speak, I can't bring it up? And it passed because everybody, they all did it in unison, right? And I just went, okay, I'm going to do it myself. I already did it with the vintage thing. I can do an evolution thing. I'll write simple rules and have simple classes, and I'll go back on the road, and I'm going to launch the Evolution and Motocross series. And I did. And I just did the whole 40,000 miles a year, going to a lot of the same promoters. And, it took a while, and we had to have support classes like modern bike support and vintage support, but it caught on. It had to catch on because the people that were coming in had no attachment to a Honda Elsinore.
Right.
And I was telling this story before that at one board meeting, I said, look, guys, my kids were, say, 5 and 6, under 10 years old. The bikes that they're going to be interested in restoring haven't been built yet. They're on a piece of paper in Japan. And if we ignore that, they're not going to be Arma members. And I'd kind of like to see them be Arma members in the future.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, we're not worried about that. And as a consequence, Arma is in serious financial peril of going away at this point.
Well, sadly,
I don't want
it shows their own history.
I know. I don't want. I put too much of my own time in it to want to see that happen.
Is current management there still unwilling to?
I think they're they're the last guys on the Titanic, and they just start
fiddling.
They're doing everything they can do in a hurry, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I would love to consult with them and come in and say, hey, number one, take half of the crap that's in your rule book and get rid of it. Start paring this thing down to make it as easy and as inviting to as many people as you can.
Yeah. Because
having all these finite rules, I mean, if you read the rule book, you wouldn't go.
Is that right?
I got a Rickman that I used to own 20 years ago back, and they have a fairly good vintage following with those kinds of bikes. And I thought, well, they're racing at Laguna Seca, and there's a motocross track at Laguna Seca that rarely ever gets used. I raced on it in the 90s, and I thought, man, I'd like to take that bike and go race there again. And I started reading the rule book. I got 2 pages into it.
Really?
No, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to jump through all those hoops. Then that's sad.
Yeah, that's
really sad.
What a dumb way to lose participants, Well, keep it very simple, because if I show up, if I have a vintage bike, I'm like, hey, this seems cool.
Right.
Let me go check it out. And I get there and they're like, oh no, you didn't have this, you didn't do that. You
have the wrong color number plates. Your helmet doesn't meet our spec. You're this, you're that. You've got 4 1/8 inches of travel on your rear shocks. I mean, it gets that crazy.
Jeez.
And it doesn't need to be, because it's a bunch of middle-aged guys just trying to have fun on old dirt.
Well, and if they would lean into it, there's also a group of kind of hipster kids that are getting into it.
Right.
LaPaglia's kid.
But all the stuff,
brain farting on his name, but he loves it and he's fast.
Oh, those guys.
And he's dragging in a bunch of his,
But those bikes would never make it through Arma Tech.
Is that right? Yeah. No, I mean,
too much travel and too much this and too much that. And I personally, when I see those kids ride vintage bikes like modern bikes, I get a big tickle out of it. It's, God damn. Yeah. Can you imagine if you took those guys back in time and had them ride that stuff at a national in 1974?
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know what to do. They'd lose their mind.
Yeah. Because they ride them with modern style and technique, but
and speed. They're really fast.
So, you've made efforts to try to get all these clubs into kind of one big series.
Yeah. When I started the Evolution thing, I thought, well, there's a bunch of independent clubs. They're all kind of doing their own thing. I don't want to go in and say, okay, I'm going to give you a set of rules and we're all going to run by them. I'll run this club that I'm running in California. You can run the one in Massachusetts, and you can run the one in Florida. But we'll just have a series that if people want to come and participate, it's all on one calendar, and it'll be good for our sport overall.
Mm-hmm.
And you find out pretty quick why they're independent, because they're not interested in being attached to anything else, which is fine. So I gave that up pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, but you'd think they'd all want to see it thrive. But I guess this is something, I guess it doesn't surprise me that much, because in our sport, I see that so often when people have something that is theirs, makes them money, or something they're proud of, man, they squeeze the puppy too tight. You know what I mean? They just refuse to let anything go for the kind of the greater good if it takes some control or dollars out of their pocket.
Yeah, and this would have put more dollars in their pocket, because we weren't coming in saying, hey, you've got to give us a percentage or any of that kind of stuff. The only thing that was going to be combined was
a unified calendar.
Well, and some advertising. It's like, okay, if we're going to do national advertising, then everybody puts in whatever, $100, right? You got 10 clubs, you got $1,000 budget to put it here, there, and wherever. But because it was part of a series, I mean, you'd be surprised how many guys chase the Arma series around, how much money they spend, and how far they go. So I know people will do it.
That's wild. Well, are those people that chase that around? I mean, they don't have a problem with everything being pre-65?
Well, now Arma has adopted all that stuff that they said they wouldn't do. I mean, virtually, to the letter of classes for the most part of all the stuff that I was proposing back then. Matter of fact, one of the guys that was charged with coming up with the class designations and all that stuff and the structure called me on the side and goes, "Hey, would you mind if I use your stuff?" I'm like, "No, because it makes sense. Use it." And he goes, "Don't tell anybody I said this." or I asked you. I don't give a shit. It just makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Especially with vintage stuff, you look for technological breaks in design that make a difference. And that's where that class...
Those are the delineating marks.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not that I'm that smart. I mean, anybody can look at it and go, well, disc brakes make a big difference, right? So you have a class pre-disc brake and a class after and whatever.
Is Dick Man rolling over in his grave?
I don't know. I never really knew how he felt about me, but I think on some level he liked me also. And
just difference of...
I think on some level he recognized that, what I was advocating was, going to be better for the overall. But I mean, it was so bad when I was, pushing the idea. They had shirts made up that said, "See no evil, Evo," right? Say no evil, do no evil. That's pretty funny, but stupid.
Yeah. Well, there's a saying that I think is pretty funny that gets used in the fire service when stuff's not happening. Like 100 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. and I feel like that's kind of what those guys were.
Yeah.
Lean into that. So the American Retrocross series, kind of what you're building out here. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, when I moved to Southern California in 98, there was a club called Southwest Vintage Racing Group. They just went by SBRG. And they had some vintage races, Carlsbad and a couple of other places. And I just, when I moved down here, I started going to their stuff, and it was pretty haphazard. I mean, you would sign up on the hood of some guy's rusty old Ford pickup truck.
Of course you would.
And that they would get around to practice at 10:30, 11 o'clock. I mean, everything was just, it was disorganized. And so after seeing that for a year or so, I threw my hat in the ring to be one of the officers of the club. And they came to me afterwards saying, "Oh man, you only missed it by one vote." Well, whatever. I don't need another job. I was just trying to help. And I found out afterwards that they were cooking the vote, kind of like Arizona. And they had the election the next year, and I threw my hat in the ring, and then they said, "Oh, well, we got a tie." And the gal that was sitting next to me goes, "Oh, I forgot to vote. I'm voting for Rick." So I became president of the club. And the first thing I did is bought plastic tables so people could write, and sign up on a table instead of somebody's truck. I bought shirts for all the guys that worked for the club, so you knew who they were versus the other guys, so you could go ask questions. And I developed a logo for them, and the stuff you do for
basic stuff,
a club, right, or a business. And in about a year, half of them quit.
Why?
Because I was ruining it. It used to be more fun when it was simple. And these were half of the club guys quit. And they were the ones that were supplying the Ford pickup and just had that, thumb in the eye approach to things. So, well, okay, let's keep going on my own. And I did, and it started building. And then we started becoming more professional. And, we had a laptop at sign up, and scoring was done immediately. And then I always try and look at whatever the downsides are, whether it's risk or whether it's inconvenience or whatever. And I hated going to races that just drug on all damn day for no good reason. So that was one of the first things, is how do we get this to end earlier in the day? And we've been running it now for 20 some years, and we're done at 1 o'clock.
Done by 1. I like that.
We start, but this is the other thing that pissed people off. When we close sign up, it's done, right? And then we go into a riders meeting before we put you out on the track. But we're done. And if you show up late, which a bunch of those guys were just used to showing up whenever, we don't run late practice, late sign up, late this, late that, because we can't keep our schedule. So 8:45 sign offs over. 8:45 to 9 o'clock is a riders meeting. Practice starts at 9. We're done. Ready to start first moto at 10, and the day is over by 1. And that includes, giving out awards. And I didn't know that was something that went away. Did you?
Giving away awards?
Yeah. I don't race with anybody
Yeah,
else.
I mean, I don't really do.
But yeah.
I've done Mammoth. They still do one there, but I haven't done really any.
Yeah, but I mean, like local races, you can pick it up next week or whatever. I was just that's part of the fun, right? Clapping for the people that or, having people clap for you. I mean, it's part of why you race.
Part of the experience.
Yeah.
So give me your perspective, having been around the sport for so long, just from early days of the sport to what it's become. What's your perspective on cost, tracks, promoters, bikes, e-bikes, where we're potentially heading, all that stuff?
Well, I think that if you look at the heyday, the biggest time period boom of motocross in the United States, the tracks were easier, so more people could do it. The bikes were more affordable, so more people could afford it. And there were lots of them. I mean, there were motocross tracks everywhere. So I don't know that you're going to put motocross tracks everywhere, but if you can look at how to make the tracks, doable for more people, then more people will ride. If you have classes for bikes that are more affordable, like we have a class for decade bikes. It's bikes 10 years old and older. And then it goes back from there to 96. So, and then, it has different breakoffs based on technology all the way back. But a bike that's 10 years old, you don't typically find on the starting line of a new or a current motocross. Well, you can buy those for a fraction of what a new bike costs, probably a third of what a new bike costs. Throw some tires on it and set suspension for you and go have fun.
Yeah.
So I think more, if you're a regional guy out there anywhere in the country, if you're not offering something like that to bolster your turnout, try it. I mean, you can always go back, but my theory is if you offer a class and nobody's in it, it doesn't cost you anything. If you don't offer a class and a guy's there with whatever it is, you lost money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that we did is you could show up with any bike and ride 2 classes. So we do the first part of the day is Moto 1 is vintage class pre 75, but it's all broken up into age groups, 40, 50, 60, 70. Well, and then there's Evo, then there's modern, and then we have another vintage class, and this time is broken up by displacement, or it's 2-stroke, 4-stroke. So you brought one bike, you can race 1 and race 5. You want to ride an Evo bike, you race it and race 2 and race 6.
Okay.
So, and modern bike guys get 2 classes that they can ride in, their age group class and then their displacement class. And so now all of a sudden you're getting 2 entry fees instead of just 1. I mean, and we don't make any money at doing these races. All the money goes right back into what we're doing. But, it gives people a place to come. They get done quick. The track's safe. that they're still involved in the sport. And that's a success. And if the ambulance doesn't run, so much the better.
That's the big one, right?
Yep.
You've had some big moments. You've got a lot of stories here. You had something happen at Farley Castle, and I'm actually headed over there this August for the Vet World Championship race that James Dopp's putting on. What a cool place for vintage or for, vet riders.
Huge history.
So much history at that place. Tell me your Roger DeCoster story. At Farley.
At Farley? Well, I don't know about Roger at Farley, but...
Did you pass Roger or something over there?
No, I passed Roger at Hollister.
Oh, I was at Hollister.
That was a when we were talking about big moments, we were doing a magazine article for Cycle World magazine, and we invited a bunch of old pros and put them on vintage bikes. And Roger had always wanted to ride an ESO, which was a Czech bike.
Yeah.
And they were built in one corner of the CZ factory, and they were 4-stroke, and he just loved the way they looked. And I had one. So I was dangling like the carrot. Hey, if you come up to Hollister and do this thing, you can ride my ESO. So he went out on the track, and it was Jeff Smith and Dick Mann and Brad Lackey and John DeSoto. And I was sitting there thinking, when am I ever going to have this chance again? Right? Probably not in my lifetime. So I suited up. And I went and got, the ESO was a 500 from the mid 60s. And I got on my Gold Star from the same period and started following Roger around. And we went around 2 or 3 laps, and he wasn't being Roger DeCoster. He was out there just
cruising. Yeah.
Right. But he left the door open, and I passed him. And I was like, you can't take that away from me. He did it the next corner, but I'll always have that pass. And I don't know, for me, like whether it was playing football with Bart Starr in my dreams or riding with Roger DeCoster in my dreams, I always had that fantasy opportunity to go ride with your hero, right?
Yeah.
And man, it was right there in front of me, and I had to take it.
That's awesome. Did you have something at Farley? Because I've got that in my notes.
Well, yeah,
something.
Farley, I was invited to come over there and race, and it was a pre-65 big GP thing that they're having over there. And I'd only ever seen Farley in magazines and all that stuff, and I did have lunch with Roger before I was going over. He goes, man, that track can be gnarly. It's really fast and it's got big holes, and be careful. So. I trained for a year, hired a physical trainer, and just busted my butt. And I'd never done that before. So I was in good shape. I was riding a lot, and went over there and got arm pump in the first corner.
That place is arm pump. Like,
I got arm pump in the first corner.
Yeah.
I was so jacked up, ready to go, right?
Cool.
I was like McGrath, that Bud Light year that he was having arm pump all the time. And guys just started going by me. And I thought, you know what? The only way I'm going to get to the end of this moto, wherever I finish, is just back her down and try and loosen my arms up and so on and so forth. Then about mid-moto, and they run much longer races than we did here in the States, I was like, all right, my hands, you know how it is when you have arm pump, your fingers don't work, and my fingers were starting to work, and I was starting to catch people, and I was getting maybe one a lap, and then last corner you go around a tree, and the finish line's right there, and the leader was ahead of me, and he went wide, and I was like, score, cut across, and all the British fans, right? You would have thought they'd be rooting for the British guy, and I'm wearing full on, American flag stuff, and they were nuts. They were crazy. They were high-fiving me when I was riding back to the pits. I just threw them my Jofa and my gloves. I was
hamming it up.
Yeah, and then I went out and won the second moto. So it was, to me, to train for a year for one race and then go 1-1, it was a big day.
Well, and on an iconic place like that too. Yeah. Where do you see vintage racing going in the next, decade or so?
I think as long as people continue to feel nostalgic, which is natural as they age. They're going to gravitate towards the things that they like, right?
Yeah.
And so if the car world's any indication of what's going to happen with the motorcycle world, you know, bikes like my old BSA Gold Star are going to become so valuable, people aren't going to race them. And there is a point where they get so valuable, nobody can buy them, and then they become less valuable. That's happening now with board track racers from the teens. I mean, it used to be that a board track racer from the teens, you know, like a Thor, or Are You a Harley, or any of the ones that were popular, were $250,000 and up.
Jeez.
I mean, it was a cost of a house back then. And now you can buy them for a third of that because the audience got
right.
So I think that what is considered vintage, and that's why I never really, you know, in Arma they called it vintage, post-vintage. It's like postmodern art, right? Vintage is whatever you like from your time period. And so if you want to call it retro or vintage, I don't care what label you put on it. As long as people still want to go back and revisit and ride the stuff that they liked, they're gonna. And and smart promoters are gonna give them an opportunity to do it. We were just talking earlier about you know, the bikes from now, if you went back 25 years, really not that different. Right? Maybe you get a 98 YC250 and a 2023 YC250, other than aluminum frame, it's pretty much the same bike. You do that same thing in you know, 1985 and go back to 1960, massive difference. So I think the good thing is we in the motorcycle world, we don't have that period of crap stuff like the car world has. I mean, there's stuff from the mid 70s to mid to late 80s. It's just all, I don't know anybody's going to want to restore that stuff.
Yeah, there was nothing that.
No, it was all EPA'd to death, and there were ugly designs, and I don't see that stuff ever becoming popular. But that bodes well for people who have the older stuff, you know, the muscle cars and all that stuff. They're going to hold value for a lot longer.
60s Cadillacs and.
Well, and the Cudas and all the stuff that's really bitching. But if you look at what's happening in the last 20 years, muscle cars are, you know, the modern muscle cars come back.
Yeah. And you think e-bikes are coming? I mean, what's your take there? That's a sort of the opposite of vintage, futuristic stuff.
Well, I mean, if they come into vogue, then internal combustion stuff will be vintage, right? I'm still not 100% convinced that that's the future.
I'm not either. You know, I know that's the line to sell for green, but I think anyone that does enough digging into what it takes to make those batteries and you know, even a car, they say you got to get to at least 60,000 miles before that's the break-even point,
right,
with an electric car. So, how many people driving around a Tesla are going to keep it past 60,000 miles? Most of them are at, you know, trading them in at 30, 40,000.
You know,
the new one.
I heard Jay Leno was talking about this very thing recently, and he goes, you know, the cool thing about electric cars is there's no motor to wear out. So you buy the car and you're good to go. Well, as much as I like Jay a lot, but as much as he'd like to say that that's true, brakes wear out, bushings wear out. I mean, you know, bearings wear out, all that stuff still is in those cars, and then that stuff's going to age out. So,
yeah.
And then what do you do with those batteries, and how much is the replacement battery going to be? I mean, I think we're going to get to a point where those replacement batteries and making your Tesla whole again is going to cost more than just buying the new electric, whatever it is, right?
One thing on the motorcycle side that I hope we don't screw this up, where they try to either integrate electric bikes into our current class structure or just replace it. I think that will be, you know, talk to the people. Anytime there's an electric bike post somewhere out there in our space, read the comments. people are not very receptive to that. And I think they're worried about what happened with 4-strokes. But I think there's a place, you know, whether it's indoor facilities or urban facilities, tracks that are on the brink of being shut down because of noise. I think there's some possibilities for them. But man, like I said, if they try to replace internal combustion or try to just say, okay, well, this one, it's got this wattage or this whatever their metric is, we'll put that with the 250s. Nah, man, we're in trouble. I think the same thing will happen that happened with 4-strokes. So,
well, if you look at history, though, it's gone back and forth between 2-stroke and 4-stroke, right? I mean, in the 60s, it was 4-strokes. Then 2-strokes came in and killed the 4-strokes, and then 4-strokes came back and killed the 2-strokes. And if they can deal with the emissions issues of 2-strokes, which they're starting to, with fuel injection and ignition and a bunch of other stuff, it can go back the other way. Because as much as I like 4-stroke modern motocross bikes, they're not light.
No, a 2-stroke engine's a much simpler, and much more efficient.
And a light bike's more fun to ride than a heavy bike.
Yeah, yeah.
So if somebody could figure that part out, and there's some new engine designs. I don't know if you've seen some of the, like that liquid piston. That's the name of the company.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they've got a motor, and then Honda's working on a new motor that is going to be a big alternative to electric. The battery thing, for example, on
the recharge time is the killer.
It's ridiculous.
It's just the killer. Or if you're a dual sporter, adventure rider, off-road guy, you just shorten your ride, 40 minutes, maybe an hour.
Right.
That's not enough.
But if you look at like a modern 250F, right, it gets to an age where you're going to have to do all the motor work to it. And then that has a certain cost affiliated with it, to pull it, rebuild it, put it back in, all that stuff, freshen up the rest of the bike. Well, guess what? That costs more than the bike's worth.
Yeah.
You can't sell that. So those bikes are tough to get rid of for that very reason. And that could start happening with the cars and the bikes, because if the cost of refurbing your Tesla or your Stark or your whatever is more than just buying a new efficient version of the same, those things are worthless.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, time will tell for sure.
I think we got plenty of time.
Yeah,
I don't think it's going to happen overnight.
I hope you're right. I hope I'm old and decrepit and out of it. I know you've got some great stories just been around the sport. You know a lot of the people in it with different riders. Tell us some good stories. Some of the industry people we'd know.
I was thinking about that today before I came down here, and I remembered some stuff. A, I've never told anybody, and B, I completely forgot. When I started Vintage Iron, I still had my other company called Energy Seal at the same time. So I had several secretaries and a big office and all that stuff. And I had one secretary that guys just love to talk to. Just whatever. They get her on the phone, and I'd be pissed because you're like, you don't need to spend that much time setting an appointment, whatever. But she'd always be on the phone. And Jimmy Wienert was a famous rider for Kawasaki and Yamaha and all that stuff. And
was that how you say his last name?
Well, Wienert.
It was how I stories are.
Yeah. Well,
whatever it is. Okay.
Yeah, he'll be pissed at me telling the stories, so it won't matter.
Okay.
That'll be the least.
Jimmy Wienert. He's a different guy. You don't know.
No, but that'll be the least of the worries mispronouncing his name. So he calls me to talk about something, right? It's the early days of Vintage Iron. And he starts talking to my secretary. And apparently this goes on for a lot more time than I was aware of.
Okay.
And then he starts calling her at home. He's not married. Let's make that clear. He wasn't married at the time. And so they're having this phone romance. And he calls me one day, and she actually puts him through to me instead of chatting him up. And he goes, "Hey, Rick, I'm thinking about coming out." I'm like, "To California?" Because he was in New York, right? And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, I'm going to come out and see your secretary. And I said, okay. I said, Jim, I couldn't think how to put it to him, right? Because I knew whatever I said, if he said it to her and it came back bad, it would be, I'd lose a good secretary. I said, well, Jim, there's like petite girls are like 125 class. And then there's like, your average girl might be a 250. This girl's more of a open class girl. And he goes, oh, yeah, but I'm just crazy about her. I'm thinking about coming out and proposing to her. I'm like, oh my God, really? He goes, yeah, I'm going to be there on Friday. Well, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
Right?
You get him the heads up.
I gave him the 500.
If you got to parse out that analogy. Yeah, all right. That's the
he was a 500 champ. I think he told me so. It's like, okay, well, come Monday, we're back in the office, right? And I said, hey, did Jim come out over the weekend? She goes, yeah, but he had to go back because he had a medical emergency. I said, what do you mean? She said, oh, he had some sort of abdominal issue. I'm thinking, oh God, he was sick to his stomach.
Yeah.
And so he just came, that guy's a salesman, man. He sold her on whatever problem he was, and he is on the next
day
out. Yeah.
Wow. A lot of commitment to not have a peek at her first.
Yeah, that was pre-internet and pre-email, and yeah.
What about Troy or Mitch or Dogger, any of those guys?
Mitch, I restored a Hodaka for him back in probably the 90s. And I was in Fresno, so that was a 5-hour drive to get down to Pro Circuit. That was when they were over on the Arma,
yeah.
Right? And that was a Hodaka Super Rat, and he loved it, so on and so forth. Then he called me one day, and he goes, hey, this thing's leaking all over the floor. I'm like, you've had it for months. What do you mean it's leaking on the floor? He goes, there's a puddle of oil underneath it. Can you come get it and fix it? I was like, yeah, I guess. It's 10-hour round trip, right? So I put a new gasket on it, and I drained the oil out of it and took it back down. And then it was many years later, like 5-6 years, we're doing the Yamaha Race of Champions, and Pro Circuit was one of the sponsors for it, and we were having a viewing party for when they actually aired it on TV, right? And Mitch shows up, and he's got the invoice from that Hodaka from like 6-7 years ago. And he goes, hey, come here, I want to talk to you about this. Huh? What? He goes, you charged me $300 for a brand new OEM chrome Hodaka gas tank. That seems like a lot. I'm like, Mitch, I got 100 people here. Can we talk about this on Monday? And he's like, no, I need to talk about it right now. He goes, $300? Like, yeah, that seems like a pretty good deal for a brand new gas tank. He goes, me too. I just wanted to fuck with you.
That sounds like it.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Make you all uncomfortable and nervous. He just loves to have you in that state.
He knew because of the whole, I think somebody poured oil underneath it from in the shop, right? They went out in the showroom, poured oil underneath it because it was there for 3 months.
Yeah, why would it just start leaking? I thought you were going to tell me someone was riding it or something.
Yeah, no. Well, it wasn't Mitch.
No, it wasn't Mitch. I want to chat a little bit about what happened with your family, man, because you lost your son 5 years ago? Three. And it's tragic. Obviously, every parent's worst nightmare, but it has led to something cool that you guys are doing. So
yeah,
tell us what happened and kind of what's come out of that.
Yeah. Well, my son, Max Doughty, took his own life early December of 2019. And as you said, it's the worst thing that any parent could think would happen, right? And it is so mind altering because from the time that you're pregnant, right, with your wife, you have hopes and dreams. Mm-hmm. And as you raise your child, you have your hopes and dreams get bigger and more specific, and you just, they have a personality and they have talents and all that stuff. So you're way deep into that commitment mentally and emotionally. And the day that they die, it's like it's gone, and your brain can't comprehend that it's gone. Your brain can't comprehend that all the almost 30 years of investment, and I'm not talking about financial investment, your heart and soul into your kids, right? It's gone. It's never going to be realized. And I spent 2 weeks just literally in an emotional fog. I mean, it was going to be 3 weeks or 4 weeks before we could have his celebration of life. But I spent 2 weeks that I would just wake up every morning crying. I'd be crying before I was awake, and I am not unique in that regard. And I don't mean to sound like a woe is me. I think any parent would go through this, and probably has. It's so surreal. I mean, the only unconditional love, in my opinion, is your kids and dog. And I mean, you love your spouse, but if it didn't work out, they'd move on, you'd move on, whatever. But it's not supposed to be. We're not wired that way to lose a child.
Yeah, it's like a disruption of the natural order of things, and
as much as your children struggle at various things, you still, if you're an optimist, they'll get through this, they'll mature, they'll go on to have families and be successful, and so on and so forth. And when that stops, I didn't know what to do.
It seems like there's you'd have to go talk to somebody who's been through it, or someone that's trained to help you through that. That isn't something I think you go through on your own.
I mean, I tried to do all that. I didn't know anybody else that had been through it. I certainly called a counselor, because I think counseling, just like motocross trainers and all, absolutely have a place, and they can be that person on the the one step removed that can help you through. So I didn't hesitate about that, but I remember coming home that night from the hospital. Well, let me back up. After I got the phone call, they didn't know if he had passed away or not. But you have children, you'll understand this. There's some sort of sense that you have of your children. You feel that, I don't know how you describe it, but there's a force, a sense of energy that your kids have, and you feel it. Your wife feels it. I didn't feel it.
Oh, really?
I was driving there, and I couldn't feel him anymore. So,
God, that's heavy.
When I got there, the police took me in a room and said he didn't make it, and I said, "Yeah, I know. They didn't need to tell me," and I knew from that moment forward, I'm never going to be the same. This is going to change me, and I didn't know how, but I knew it was going to change me. And after I struggled through all of that, I woke up one morning, and same MO, tears streaming down my face, and I've always been one that's been open to whatever. I don't shut things down. It was like a telepathic vision but I'm wide awake. I'm sitting up in my bed, and I could see a vision of a black lab on the outside of a sliding glass door in the rain. And my head's going, well, what is going on? I'm losing my mind because I see a vision, and it's not foggy, it's clear. And I got this sense of calm. And I went, oh shit, it's Max. He made a decision that he shouldn't have. He's on the other side of this sliding glass door in the rain, and he just wants me to know he's okay. And as soon as my brain, I'm having this internal conversation, he said, now you got it. And I could hear his voice. And it wasn't audible. It was internal. And I went downstairs and just sobbed and told my wife what happened. And ever since that day, I've been connected, because I said, okay, you're in a different dimension than I'm in now, but I'm not going to cut off my communication or your communication with me, and communicate with me anytime you want to. And I know it sounds freaky, but I think once you're attached to your children, you're always attached to your children, and they to you. And if you stay open to different kinds of communication, not the ones you've had in the past, it's not like I think he's just going to show up again. Then I think there's something there to be had. Mm. I could give you a whole bunch of examples, but my dad died the year before, Max. And so we were having the celebration of life. And out of the blue, over in Corona, you know where the Dos Lagos area is? Yeah. So we were having it over there. My dad was a fighter pilot. And are you familiar with the missing man formation? World War II planes, low altitude, missing man formation, right over the restaurant, banked around, came back over and disappeared. Everybody in the parking lot saw it. Like, what the hell? Why would that happen? Right? World War II era stuff. And my brother said, Dad's watching out for him. He just wanted you to know. So there again, you know, like, I don't know why those things happen, but I do know that if you pay attention, there's something to be had there. So long story short, I make a better advocate than a victim. So I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something. And I knew how I felt. And if I could help any other parents get through that period of time, I wanted to do that. But if I could help any people, not just kids, but people, not get to that point where they're so desperate they take their life, right? Mm-hmm. Then, you know, there's a saying in the Bible, as we restore others, we too are restored. So if I could help people that get to that precipice of taking their life to reconsider, and if I could help any parents that have to deal with that outcome if it doesn't go a good way, I want to commit myself to trying to do that. And it's not easy. You know, I was pretty aimless at what to do, so I've tried on a couple of different organizations that didn't work real well, that didn't fit, and nothing against them, but it just didn't work, and they weren't set up for what we needed to do. And another one of those revelation moments, I got a call from somebody and they said, hey, we just had an event and we were talking about Max Matters and the whole deal. And this young woman came up and said, I want to talk to that person, being me. Can you get in touch with them? And I said, well, yeah, sure, absolutely. Here's my phone number, give it to her. And she called, we talked. She said, well, I've been in the motorcycle and mountain bike industry for a long time. We have mutual friends. I've tried to commit suicide twice. And after the second time, I decided that I was going to educate myself and become a crisis counselor, so on and so forth. And I heard about what you're doing, and I want to be involved. I was like, that's sensational. I don't know what we're going to do, but it'd be great to have somebody like you on board. I said, by the way, what's your name? She said, Max. So her name's Maxine Irving. She's gotten more done in like a couple of weeks than I ever thought we'd be able to do. She comes from an empathetic point of view. I'm really hopeful we'll just be able to help some people.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to stop all suicide in the world. We're not going to help every parent. But if we can start with making it easier to find help, that's our primary goal. So we have maxmatters.org. And if you're in a crisis, you can go there and say, I need help now. Push a button. You don't have to read a bunch of crap. You just push a button and you'll get connected with somebody.
Well, it's something for whatever reason, too much ego, too much testosterone, it doesn't get discussed in this sport. And I think probably all sports, but motocross is bad. And we've lost some guys to this. Right. I'm off the top of my head, I can think of 3 guys who've taken their own life in our little space.
Right.
And even more who've been very close.
Right.
I know some of those same guys. And so just to talk about, just for some of these, I listened to the first podcast you guys did and I thought, man, this is a great start. Just for people who are getting into that bad headspace to be able to listen, know there's a place to reach out to, man, it's a huge service.
And if you're a thinking person, you've thought about suicide because it's always an option, right? It's not like a secret. Because you thought about it doesn't mean you're crazy. If you have depression, doesn't mean you're crazy, or if you have anxiety, but it's not a healthy state of mind to be in. Mm-hmm. And you need to get some help to get through that time period. And, once you get an effective counselor and they work well with you, you can talk through a lot of stuff and see it through a different lens and develop a plan. And when you have a plan versus no plan, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
Right. And suicide's the permanent solution to a temporary problem. Right. And it happens typically when people are, the pastor that came to our event for Max put it very succinctly. Only people who have lost all hope do this. Mm. And if we can help bring some hope, to get them through the next 15 minutes, half an hour, next day, whatever, just not that moment. One of the things, Marty Moats was a dear friend of mine, and he took his life. And you notice I don't have a problem talking about that because I'm not embarrassed for Marty. I'm not embarrassed for Max. There was internet threads, and lots of people get on and talk about, say different comments about what was going on with Marty and so on and so forth. And one guy really pissed me off. And this comment just in general pisses me off. He took the coward's way out. And you know what I told him? If you think it's the coward's way out, try it. See how much strength it would take to do that, to overcome your natural sense of preservation. When you get depressed, when you are having a a bad episode, whatever the situation is, and we've all had them, whether it's with our kids or with our parents or spouse, work. I mean, there's a lot of things where you just go, screw it. Why do I want to do this anymore? I'm just beating my head against the wall and it's not getting me anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, that may be true, but there's other ways to go, other routes to take, and other people to be with. And, that's all it takes, is to have another avenue of hope.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's something that's important to me, and I wish we would have made more progress by now, but I don't give up easy.
Yeah, that's obvious. Where can people find that podcast?
maxmatters.org.
Okay.
And that website's going to continue to evolve. But again, we don't want to make a website to where people have to go and just read a bunch of stuff. We want it to be a resource. We're not going to be dispensing counseling ourselves because we're not qualified. I'm qualified as a parent to talk about losing a child. That's it. Professionals need to be able to help the people who are really in crisis. And, I was not even aware that there are crisis stabilization units. Are you familiar with those?
Just from talking to you.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, you're in the med industry, and I never even heard of it. It's great because you can go to one of those and say, hey, I'm in crisis mode, and they'll take care of you.
Yeah.
For, however long you need to get stable, and they can hook you up with counselors and all the aftermath. Because, just because you didn't follow through this time doesn't mean you're cured.
Yeah. Well, there's multiple ways it can outcome. Sonny Garcia was a good friend of mine, and one of the toughest,
absolutely,
gnarliest guys I have ever known. And I would ask him about his depression, and he goes, man, I said, can't you just think about your kids and just like focus on something good, your bikes, you love to ride, man, go riding.
Right.
He goes, when it comes on me, all I can do is curl up in a ball in my closet. He goes, you don't understand how strong it is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, when we had that talk, I was just like, yeah, I don't understand it.
Right.
Because I just can't imagine being in that place. But if it's crumpling you, that's pretty heavy. Because he's not a guy who easily buckles, you know.
Well,
but the way it played out for him, yeah, it's no better than him being gone. It's tragic.
Yeah. I don't know, because I don't suffer from severe depression. I mean, I think everybody gets depressed.
Sure.
But from some of the people that I have talked to, they won't even drink water. Like, why would you not drink water? Because then I'd have to get up and go to the bathroom. And it's that level of despair.
Yeah.
That it's debilitating.
Right.
And again, I'm not qualified to help somebody with that, but we ought to be able to create a really easy to access line of communication with somebody who can.
Right.
And now there's a national suicide hotline. There's a text line. There's these crisis stabilization units. There's a bunch of things. It's kind of a cause celeb in the world right now, and I'm glad because it's been underserved for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for those people that suffer from that, they almost feel isolated even more, because when he told me that, I'm like, man, I can't even imagine being that overcome with that.
Right.
So then they feel like, well, yeah, I must be really weird. I must be something wrong with me.
Right.
So I don't know if, I look back at that conversation and go, man, maybe I shouldn't have said that to him. Maybe I should have, and I just went, dude, you need to talk to somebody that can help you.
Yeah. But he knows, and the other people that I've spoken with that really suffer from depression, they know not everybody feels that way. They also know they're not crazy, but it's like anything else. You've got to get the proper kind of help.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there are people that understand it, other people, and it can help you work through it.
Well, and
you just have to reach out.
And Maxine Irving, that is working with us, she understands from, being a victim of severe depression.
Yeah, what a great resource, someone who's been to that precipice like you talked about.
Yeah, and she comes from an empathetic point of view, so she's steering all the stuff, and I'm just trying to help with the business end of it, and I'm just really thankful that she's come our way, and her name's Mac.
Yeah, that's crazy. Another message to you.
It's not crazy, but it is good.
Well, we appreciate you talking about it and sharing your whole story. Man, I really value folks who've been around this industry for a long time and are still connected and engaged. And I know you watch current racing and you're still following vintage and involved. And we're going to, there's not that many people that have been around since the inception for the most part.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your opinion, and you're
fortunate.
Yeah, you really are. Well, thanks for coming on. Great catching up. Great to see you. MaxMatters.org. We will continue to promote that through our site, and as new podcasts come out, we'll promote that as well. Appreciate your time. Stick around, guys. We'll be back to wrap up the show. If you or someone you know is struggling, there is help. Go to MaxMatters.org or call or text 988. You are not alone. All right, folks, thank you for tuning into the Whiskey Throttle Show. I want to thank Rick Doughty for taking the time to come in. Certainly a colorful career and history in our sport. You ever need something for a vintage bike or question about vintage racing, he's the guy to go to. So we appreciate them, Rick, for taking his time to come in. Thanks for tuning in. Please support the folks that support us. That keeps this show coming to you. We appreciate them. We make sure they're all elite level brands and only quality products. So thank you guys for tuning in. See you on the next show. The Whiskey Throttle Show is brought to you by Yamaha. Join the Blue Crew today and take advantage of all that Yamaha has to offer, including amateur racing trackside support, awesome Yamaha contingency, Jason Rain's demos and instructional classes, and frankly, the most high-performing motorcycles available on the market today. Whether you're looking for a 4-stroke, a 2-stroke, a side-by-side, a quad, a boat, a generator, Yamaha prides themselves on absolute top-level quality and reliability. Rev your heart with Yamaha and join the Blue Crew today. Method Race Wheels, bringing you the lightest, strongest, fastest wheels in off-road for your truck, van, sprinter, UTV, or SUV. They've been dominating the Baja 500 and 1000 and every major off-road event around the world for years with high quality and performance. They also look amazing. They come in a bunch of different styles and colors for your rig, so check them out. You can get 20% off a set of wheels using our code Whiskey Throttle. No capitals, no spaces. 20% off using our code. Check them out. Troy Lee Designs is the leader in off-road motocross apparel and style. So whether you're looking for a cool new paint job for your helmet, maybe your name and number on your helmet lettered on, you're looking for new gear, you're looking for mountain bike gear, off-road gear, they've got the brand new Scout line and GP and SE models. Troy Lee Designs has it all. They've been leading this industry for decades, and they're going to continue to do it. Check out TroyLeeDesigns.com. SKDA is a moto graphics and seat covers company with several offices based around the globe. For too long, bikes and graphics have all looked the same. They just start to blend together. SKDA is working to change that. With super clean and unique design work, a bike with SKDA graphics stands out in a crowd and adds a touch of art to the world of moto. Hey, we need that. SKDA prides itself on providing premium customer service both before and after the sale is made. Visit SKDA online to view the current product range and get in touch with their team to get your bike refreshed. I want to just make a mention here that these guys, not only is their design way outside the box, very, very cool. They'll work with you on custom things. The products are incredible. Okay, they'll speak for themselves. But what's really awesome, and you'll notice this the minute you order one of these, man, they give you an email saying, hey, the product's been shipped. Hey, the product is here. It landed in this spot. Hey, it's coming today. Hey, your product's been delivered. They're just so good about staying in touch with you and letting you know where it's at. Customer service is 100%, and that's just something that's rare these days. Check out SKDA. Here at the Whiskey Throttle Show, we're all about supporting brands that support our sport. And there's one tire company that has never walked away from the sport of motocross and supercross, and it's Dunlop. When times got tough and the economy took a crash, Dunlop stepped up and stayed with our sport to support it and the athletes and individuals that love it. Their MX-53 line and MX-33 lines absolutely dominate this sport. Every national championship at the pro level has been won in the last decade, and nearly every single amateur national championship at Loretta Lynn's has been won on a Dunlop. So if you're looking for high performance, you're looking for amazing quality, and you're looking to support a brand that never turns its back on our sport, there's only one choice for you, and it's Dunlop. Pro Circuit is the leader in aftermarket performance and quality. Whether you're looking for a little more horsepower out of your engine, some quality hard parts to improve the way your bike feels and looks, better handling through suspension or linkage arms, Pro Circuit is where you need to stop. It's your one-stop shop. You can go in there and get everything you need to make your motorcycle go from average to exceptional. Pro Circuit's got enough number one plates on their wall to side an entire home, and there's a reason for that. They're very, very good at what they do. The highest quality products with one goal in mind, and that's winning. Check out ProCircuit.com. Nihilo Concepts is leading the way in aftermarket hard parts. With their secondary on-switch device, something that was much needed in this sport, they've been innovating and bringing new products to market. Their latest is the new Nihilo Run Cool brake pistons. They're designed to be stronger than stock and provide exceptional cooling performance with less brake drag. Most OEM calipers pistons are made from aluminum that just can't hold up to the heat and extreme demands of serious racing. When they get hot, the aluminum will distort, causing loss of hydraulic pressure and brake failure. Nihilo's Run Cool pistons limit the area that boiling hot hydraulic fluid is able to come in contact with the piston, leaving 2/3 of the piston volume in open air with breather holes to enhance the cooling ability. It's made of a proprietary stainless blend, which is better at dissipating heat. You have issues with brake fade or brake failure, check out Nihilo Concepts among their many amazing hard parts and carbon fiber parts and titanium. NihiloConcepts.com. Seat Concepts is the leader in motorcycle saddles. If you're looking for a new cover or a new seat entirely, Seat Concepts is the place to go. They make custom seat foams catered to your height, weight, riding ability, riding type. They also have waterproof covers and foams that will not break down if you ride in a lot of inclement weather. And they pride themselves on being much more comfortable than OEM or any other aftermarket company. If you're looking for a new seat or a new cover, Seat Concepts, there's nothing better. Need to replace something on your bike that's worn out? Look no further than Pro-X. These guys aim to make everything OEM quality or better at an affordable price. And they've also got some new products coming. So right now, chains, sprockets, anything inside the engine internally, air filters. If it wears out, Pro-X makes it, and they make it at a quality level that's OEM or better. And they've got some new things coming that are awesome. A complete engine rebuild kits for the Polaris RZR 800s. Need to replace something on your bike that's worn out? Look no further than Pro-X. These guys aim to make everything OEM quality or better at an affordable price. And they've also got some new products coming. So right now, chains, sprockets, anything inside the engine internally, air filters. If it wears out, Pro-X makes it, and they make it at a quality level that's OEM or better. And they've got some new things coming that are awesome. A complete engine rebuild kits for the... If you've got a little Grom that's looking to get started in the motorcycle world, the best way to get them going is on a Stasic bike. They've got multiple sizes, so from your very young Groms to those who are a little more grown up, you can start them safely. They've got controls that allow you to control the speed so he can't get going too quick. They can touch the ground. There's not a lot of noise to distract them. It's the perfect way to get your child involved in motorcycling at a very young age. And if you've got a kid who's already out ripping, there's series popping up all over. For those of you in Southern California, go to www.ameminicross.com and join their local series. If you're outside of this state, contact your local track and ask them about starting a Stasic class at your local track. Get over to Stasic.com and check out all they've got going on. Motul USA, we lean hard on these lubricants to keep us on the track and on the trail. And Motul has proven their quality over and over, most recently with their Dakar win with Ricky Brabeck. They're sponsoring Supercross teams. They're diving into our sport again full throttle, and we're stoked to have them on board. Amazing products, top to bottom. Motul USA, go check them out. And finally, last but not least, Specialized Bicycles. If you are in the market to start pedaling, this is where you want to start. They've got great entry-level bikes all the way up to the Cadillac, the new Levo e-bike, anything in between, man. It doesn't matter what kind of riding you're doing. Go check out and start with Specialized. Don't waste your time on something that's going to break. The derailler's not going to shift after a couple months. Get something quality. These guys make it. Specialized leads that industry.
Thanks for watching and listening to the Whiskey Throttle Show. Be sure to like and subscribe to get notified when new shows go up. And be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And visit whiskeythrottlemedia.com for additional content.